One Piece Supreme Control, Chapter 101-120. Chapter 101 The City of Seven Waters. Hey, I didn't admit to being a brother with you mortals. Analu struggled, standing up with a reluctant expression on his face. No one paid any attention to him. Bucky knocked him hard on the head, causing Analu to let out a scream of pain. Then, everyone started to set off and walked towards the death god. 2 hours later, Analu was thrown on the deck by Bucky. This rough way made Analu's face twitch constantly, and he was already very angry in his heart. But the boat was full of people, still ignoring him. This cold look made his heart tremble inexplicably, a little sad. Didn't you say it's a brother? Is this how you treat your brothers? Of course, Analu didn't say these words. His arrogant temperament would not allow himself to say such unwilling words. The Grim Reaper began to sail slowly, and Analu was tied to the deck with a stinky face. Looking at the eyes of every crew member, they were so angry that they wanted to eat people. Yo-yo, look, the eyes of this kid Analu are so scary. Drizzt noticed Analu inadvertently and said loudly with a smile. You kid, do it well. Bucky walked over and slammed his hand down. Analu closed his eyes in a conditioned reflex, thinking that the other party was going to hit him. But he didn't want Bucky to just pat him on the shoulder. When you get off the empty island, I will untie you, but don't mess around. Mortal. Analu opened his mouth and was about to curse, while Luo impatiently stuffed a rag into his mouth, blocking his mouth. After sailing, the Reaper slowly left the empty island. Through divination, Drizzt obtained the closest method to leaving the empty island, which could be reached in about 2 hours. Glades, prepare the meal, it's time to eat. Yang Qing greeted. Glades nodded and ran into the kitchen, and then the sound of the kitchen knife hitting the cutting board kept coming. Glades brought it up. Crack. Eat it. Glades took off the cloth in Amy's intersection, and took off the Halushi handcuffs on the latter's hand, and loosened him. Analu was immediately stunned. He let go of his hand and looked at the plate of food in front of him, feeling a little unbelievable. You are free. This kid just freed himself. He suddenly looked at Yang Qing and the others, but was stunned again. This group of people clearly saw this scene, but they were not panicked at all, and they were not worried about escaping. Eat it quickly, it will lose its taste when it's cold. The food I make tastes best when it's hot. Glades smiled. Looking at you, you've been hungry for a long time. But don't leave it, or I'll beat you up. Analu sat there blankly, watching Glades back, then picked up the food and ate it silently. He was indeed a little hungry. He could choose to leave here, but he didn't move. Perhaps the reason why he chose to stay was exactly what the person who defeated him said. In the future, it will be a brother. This sentence made Analu's heart a little warm. On the side, Bucky came over with the food with a smile, and squatted beside Analu. Hey, how is it? Did you fight the captain before? Captain. Analu raised his eyebrows. It's that person. Bucky pointed to Yang Qing who was sitting on the bow. Yes, he. Analu nodded, then paused. Not bad. It's not bad. Bucky was stunned, then laughed. You kid said the captain is not bad, that's the captain. Analu frowned, and then said coldly, Mortal, you are really annoying. A blue electric light flashed on his body, causing Bucky to run away immediately, causing Drizzy's group to laugh. Analu looked at a group of people laughing in the distance, snorted coldly, and continued. Have a meal. After a few mouthfuls, he felt that the taste of this meal was really good. After a while, Glades came over and took away Analu's plate. Seeing the latter eating cleanly, Glades nodded with satisfaction and said, It's not bad, it's clean. Before leaving, he paused and threw a sentence. Actually, everyone is not bad. Let's experience it well, Analu. I can feel you're lonely. Analu's eyes narrowed, then raised his head to look at Glades' back. His face was cold, and he didn't say a word. 2 hours later, the Reaper arrived at the place Glades said, and then slowly descended through the Beibihai, heading towards Qinghai. Can you know where we landed? Yang Qing sat on the bow and asked with a dignified face. On the Reaper. everyone had already tied balloons, and all kinds of shells were also installed below. Used to reduce shock. It's not clear yet. Drizzt shook his head, but according to the map, it should be an unnamed island near the capital of Seven Waters. The capital of Seven Waters. Yang Qing's eyes flickered. Unlike Luffy and his group in the original book, they were actually near the capital of Seven Waters. Hold on tightly to the things on the boat and don't fall off. It's hard for me to take care of you when I control the boat. Yang Qing shouted coldly, Analu. Huh, Analu was taken aback. Protect yourself, Yang Qing said. Cut, Analu pouted, not thinking that something would happen to him. At the next moment, Analu's face changed, and the Reaper began to sink slowly, and the speed also caused by the weight. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Greatly increased, the strong wind whistled past his ears, and the momentary gravity made Analu lose his balance. Boom! A circle of invisible light shrouded the entire Reaper. Yang Qing controlled the ship, and with the help of the balloon above and the shell below, after a full quarter of an hour, the Reaper finally slowed down. Seeing the ship's steady descent, all the people on board were relieved. Analu's face was ugly, and his forehead was covered with sweat. Eat this. Luo came over, said coldly, and threw an item to Analu. Analu took a look, but it was a black pill. As soon as his face darkened, he was about to throw it out, but Drizzt hurriedly stopped him. This is a good thing, eat it quickly. Trust Luo, Luo is our ship doctor. Only then did Analu stop, and he threw the pill into his mouth expressionlessly. After 3 seconds, his face turned red. The ship landed smoothly towards the bottom. An hour later, with a loud bang, countless seawater splashed, causing ripples in the sea, and the Reaper landed on the Great Channel again. Drizzt. At this moment, Yang Qing jumped on the deck and shouted, Fix Dylan's position, hurry up. Drizzt's face was serious, and the people in the boat were also solemn at this time. Analu looked at the group of people and stood up, a little puzzled. Our brother is still alive and dead. Chapter 102. Every second counts. About a day has passed since Dylan's was stranded on Gaia Island. One day is enough time for a lot of things to happen. Although they believed in Dylan's strength, everyone was still worried about Dylan's life and death. Hearing Yang Qing's words, Drizzt didn't hesitate at all. After the cards flashed a scarlet light in the sky, after about a minute, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Where? Yang Qing asked without hesitation. It's in the capital of Seven Waters, Drizzt said in amazement. Yang Qing's eyes became sharp, and everyone glanced at each other, but there was a flash of surprise. No one thought that Dylan's was actually in front of them. Let's go to the Seven Waters. Yes. The Grim Reaper pierced through the sea and drove quickly towards the Seven Waters. As long as they arrive at the Seven Waters, with the power of Analu, they can quickly find where Dylan's is. In the capital of Seven Waters, the marine soldiers of the brigade walked through the street. There was a man in the center with his head down and was locked by Halushi handcuffs. There were 4 strong marines guarding him on the left and right. The team of Navy soldiers marched forward silently, heading towards the station of the sea train. It stopped after half an hour, and the 2 lieutenant generals in front were very close and had a short conversation. Is that him? To be taken to Judiciary Island? Yes, Dylan's of the Death God Pirates, escorted to Judiciary Island for trial, faster. One of the lieutenant generals had an accident in his eyes, swept Dylan's and said in a low voice, How can such a person be asked to be taken to Judiciary Island? I heard that it was a request from the World Court. Another whispered. Half an hour later, the sea train made a roar. Dylan's was detained in the frontmost compartment of the car. His face was expressionless, his head was bowed, and no one could see what he was thinking at this time. Things are tortuous and bizarre, and Dylan's is even more helpless and angry at the moment. Unexpectedly, he was caught by the sea soldiers. The arrival of the Tsuruyama Allied Army did delay the time of his death, but they were not the opponents of the Doflamingo family. What changed things was the arrival of Crocodile's gang of pirates. Crocodile of the Department of Nature, and his subordinates, actually fought on a par with Doflamingo's group. My enemy of Crocodile, others have no right to execute. Dylan's remembered the cruel words of Crocodile. This guy who is naturally a rustling fruit is indeed a bit powerful, and he can even fight with Doflamingo. In the end, the two groups suffered a defeat, which made Doflamingo extremely angry. It was at this time that the sailors arrived. The brigadier-level navy has quite terrifying strength. His arrival disturbed the two groups of pirates in the war. They left ruthless words and left quickly. Dylan's also saw the opportunity and left the battlefield. I thought I could escape, but I didn't want to be caught by the Marines anyway. In the sea train, everyone was silent. The staff of the World Court who was responsible for caring for Dylan's wore sunglasses and could not see the expression on his face, but they did not say a word. The sailors were neat and tidy, and they were silent. For a time, the atmosphere in the sea train was unexpectedly quiet. How to escape? Dylan still didn't give up at this time, thinking to himself. At the same time, the Reaper approached the coast of the Seven Waters. Enelu, find Dylan's, hurry up. Yang Qing said with a solemn expression. Drizzt, keep counting. Inexplicably, he had a bad premonition in his heart, as if Dylan's was suffering from an unimaginable crisis. Amy looked disdainful, but still activated his ability, and in an instant, seeing the domineering and the ability of Xinwang, enveloped the entire Seven Waters. After a minute, he shook his head strangely. The person you mentioned was not found. No. Yang Qing's face changed, looking at Drizzt, only to see that the latter also looked ugly. The horoscope shows that Dylan's is heading towards Judiciary Island. Justice Island. Everyone was shocked. People born in this world are very clear about the meaning of Judicial Island. As long as you enter the gate of Judicial Island that represents absolute justice, you must be dead and no life. This island with absolute authority represents the absolute justice of the World Court and symbolizes the whole world. Yang Qing's eyes flickered, and in a blink of an eye, he realized that this was someone specializing in him. And who this person is obvious. A pirate with a bounty of less than 100 million in the Great Waterway has not yet been able to enter the Judicial Island. Those who enter Judiciary Island are defined as the most annoying people in the world. For example, Robin, and Dylan's, whether he is offering a bounty or the level of harm to the world, has not yet reached this level. Monet. Yang Qing clenched his fists and turned around. After many years, is he going to go back and solve this serious problem? He even pointed the finger at his partner. This person is like a poisonous snake hidden in the dark. He is inconspicuous, but he doesn't know when he will come out and bite you. In terms of time, it's too late. Yang Qing made a resolute decision. Enelu, you go with me, the two of us are responsible for rescuing Dylan's. Then he swept over to the people on the boat and instructed, as for you, find a good boatman on this island to be responsible for the preparation of the new boat. Are we going to change boats? Moria asked in surprise. Yes, next we will reach Wei. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The end of the first half of the Big Fairway, and then it will enter the second half, and at that time, we are not only these people. Yang Qing's eyes flashed with ambition and affirmed. Bucky heard this and shouted excitedly, "Ha ha, am I finally going to be the captain?" Enelu. Yang Qing looked at Enelu. Enelu poked out his ears, then smiled and said, "Just in time to meet the powerhouses of the island city." Yang Qing laughed, and everyone else laughed too. It seems that this newcomer has initially integrated into it. Next, Drizzt told Enelu and Yang Qing where Dylan's was, and the two exchanged glances. Enelu turned into a flash of lightning and disappeared here instantly, while Yang Qing suddenly rose into the sky and headed towards the sea train. Fly in the direction. Next, but every second counts. If you wait for the sea train to enter Judicial Island, it will be very troublesome. If the general is attracted, this is not what Yang Qing hoped. Chapter 103 Sweeping the Audience. Enelu turned into lightning, and the speed was extremely fast. The net of his heart opened, and the surrounding area was huge. After walking along the track of the sea train for about 3 minutes, he had already seen the trace of the sea train. And Yongqing's speed was much slower than Anilu, which made him a little helpless. No way, the speed of lightning is comparable to the speed of light. The two of them were in tandem, moving along the sea train at high speed. About 5 minutes later, Yongqing also saw the trail of the sea train, and Anilu was standing at the top of the sea train at this moment, looking at him provocatively. This kid. Yongqing was dumbfounded. Anilu still didn't seem to be convinced at this moment. How is it, have you found Dylan's? Yongqing asked when they landed on the top of the sea train, and the strong sea wind blew the two men's robes constantly. Anilu's long stick turned and pointed at the head of the sea train. The person you mentioned is right there. How about the deployment? Will it be troublesome to rescue Dylan's? Yongqing asked solemnly. The intervention of Tianlong people, especially Monet, might not be so easy. Nilu didn't know what a lieutenant general looked like, and he didn't know what the person in the black suit represented, so he just said nonchalantly, a total of 13 people are in one compartment, and as for the back, there are 5 compartments in a row. All the men in the navy and the black suit. In other words, there are nearly 100 troops. Yongqing's face relaxed, and from the perspective of troops alone, it seems that there are not as many as in the original book. Yes, there are 87 people in total. Anilu nodded and confirmed the number. Go ahead, rescue Dylan's as soon as possible, and remember to be careful. Yongqing urged. A sarcastic smile appeared on Anilu's face, and then he raised his voice. Be careful. No, God doesn't need to be careful in front of mortals. Ziz. In the blink of an electric light, Anilu had already disappeared in front of Yongqing, causing the latter's expression to change as he cursed with hatred, this arrogant boy. Immediately following, Yongqing quickly ran on the sea train and ran towards the front of the train. Woo 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 woo. The sea train made a long sound and drove fast on the track. In the front section, in the first carriage, it was still quiet. Dylan's lowered his head deeply, racking his brains to think about how to escape. These hateful Halushi handcuffs. Dylan's had a severe headache. At this moment, he felt that he was so weak that he couldn't even exert any strength. The man in the black suit next to him sat tightly beside him and squeezed him in the middle. It wouldn't give him a chance to escape at all. Suddenly, the lieutenant general who was sitting next to him suddenly narrowed his eyes and pressed his right hand on the pistol on his waist. Who is it? The lieutenant general shouted, and everyone in the carriage became nervous. Dylan's raised his head abruptly, looked at the person coming, and then he stayed for a while. In other words, everyone in the entire carriage was stunned at this moment. A piece of lightning flickered, the crackling sound kept ringing, and then a large piece of thunder and lightning attacked, directly covering everyone. 2 seconds later, a burning smell came out, black smoke emerged from the seat, and the figure of Anilu appeared here. Everyone, including the man in the black suit, collapsed on the ground, shaking from time to time, but already lost consciousness. Vulnerable, Anilu glanced around, his eyes contemptuous. Then he looked at the dignified lieutenant general in front of him, and the 2 men in black suits beside him. Is it the only 3 of you left? Anilu, who was arrogant and 2 meters tall, was condescending. The 4 taiko drums behind him, and the blue electric light that filled his body made him look like a god. Who are you? The lieutenant general shouted. Who am I? Anilu strode forward, swept the long stick, and directly drove the 3 people back 3 meters, breaking up countless chairs, with a look of contempt and invincibility. I am a god. Ziz. Thunder and lightning began to flicker again. The lieutenant general changed his face, pulled out the pistol on his waist, and immediately pulled the trigger, 3 times in a row, and 3 short and dull gunshots came out. Anilu's face was indifferent, his eyes were cold, his head tilted left and right twice, dodging the bullet. The remaining bullet passed through his chest, and only a trace of electric light appeared, which made the lieutenant general's complexion change instantly. Nature system. Thunder fruit. At this moment, the 3 people present realized it, and their hearts were shocked. This guy turned out to be the thunder fruit of the nature department. Known as the strongest thunder fruit, it definitely has the potential of no less than the three generals. At the same time, it also means that this kid has a strong attack power, but also has an immortal body. The three black suits looked at each other and shot at the next moment. 6 styles. Shave. In an instant, the three black suits disappeared here. Nilu's eyes flashed, and there was a ferocious look in his eyes. He raised his long stick horizontally and stabbed him suddenly behind him. At the same time as the long stick attacked, thunder and lightning filled the entire surface of the stick, full of high heat. Paper painting. The face of a man who had just appeared immediately changed drastically, and the other party actually saw through the direction of his attack. The stick pointed straight at his heart, and the great danger made his forehead sweat. Is it useful? Analu's face was cold, and the tip of the long stick released a series of lightning bolts. He went around to the man in the black suit behind him, and after a short voice, it had turned into a mass of charred black. Next, Analu looked at the top of his head, lightning flashed all over his body, and elementalization was carried out. Lan. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Foot. With a loud shout from above, a blue slash rushed out, directly severing Analu's waist. The latter's expression was casual, the long stick suddenly jabbed, and the huge force accompanied the thunder and lightning, making a hissing sound. Poof. With a soft sound, the long stick stabbed the man's heart directly, stabbed the man in the black suit above his head with a chill. Then he stretched out his right index finger and pressed it towards the air ahead. Crack crack. A series of lightning bolts rushed out, and a black shadow filled with the smell of scorched black and scorched meat fell from the front corner and fell heavily to the ground. In the blink of an eye, in less than 3 seconds, Analu solved the 3 people of the World Court. This scene shocked everyone present. Almost like a true god, he seems to be able to see everyone's actions and judge their next move. The powerful attack power and impeccable prediction ability make Analu almost invincible. Standing alone on the field, sweeping all opponents, his look of contempt, pride, and self-confidence makes anyone feel that this person is full of strong domineering. Chapter 104 Meeting Ceremony. Crack. At this moment, the door on the opposite side suddenly opened wide, and a series of soldiers and men in black suits were about to pour in. However, he had already heard the sound of the battle just now, alarming the people on the entire sea train. Oh, is there anything else? Analu raised his eyebrows, the long stick pointed at the opposite side, and a blue electric light appeared from the tip of the stick. The lieutenant general on the opposite side changed his face, suddenly raised his fist and attacked Analu. The pitch-black color made Analu have a bad feeling in his heart, and the long stick swung horizontally, blocking the front of the lieutenant general. Bang! The domineering fist with armed color slammed hard on Analu's long stick, but even the blue electric light on it was scattered. This scene made Analu's eyes shrink. How is this possible? He had never seen anyone who could disperse thunder and lightning. The fist of the person in front of him was the same as his captain's weapon, which could ignore thunder and lightning and directly attack his body. Protect the prisoner, I'll stop this man. Quick! The lieutenant general shouted loudly. Yes. When the soldiers who rushed in saw the tragic situation in the field, they froze for a while, then hurriedly replied, and then rushed towards the carriage. This is my first battle, how can I make you succeed? Analu shouted loudly, and a dazzling thunderbolt erupted from the long stick, and then the next moment, the entire carriage was flooded with thunderbolt again. The sea soldiers in the black suits let out a series of screams. Under the attack of thunder and lightning, they didn't even have the slightest defense. The lieutenant general's face changed greatly, but he was helpless. The ability of the natural system like this is terrifying to the extreme. Especially the other party, who is suspected to have mastered the domineering, is even more difficult to deal with. Discharge, 50 million volts. At this moment, Analu pointed his hand at him. The lieutenant general's expression changed, and he was about to dodge when he moved, but almost at the same time, the surrounding space suddenly trembled, and the Lieutenant General found that he couldn't move at all. A second later, with black eyes all over his body, he fell heavily to the ground. Also, there is one more person. The Lieutenant General fainted with unwillingness flashing in his eyes. Dillons was stunned to see what happened in front of him for almost 30 seconds, and his mind couldn't react. Who the hell is this nature guy? It's too strong. Simply invincible. As soon as the lightning strikes, who will compete? The terrifying attack power, the speed that everyone can't react to. In the face of ordinary miscellaneous soldiers, it is easy to complete the instant kill, and even the strong can support it for a while without defeat. Thorn. At this moment, the iron sheets of the sea train over Dillons separated automatically, and a figure jumped down. Yangqing landed heavily behind the sea train, glanced around the scene, and looked at Anilu with some surprises. Yo, Anilu, it's not bad. Cut. Anilu's long stick turned and put it away, looking at Dillons with disdain on his face. Captain. Dillons was surprised, he really didn't expect. Why are you here? I'm in trouble for the deputy captain of the Death God, how can the captain not come? Yangqing laughed loudly, then looked at Heilushi's handcuffs, his eyes narrowed, can you find the key? Before getting into the car, it was thrown away by another sailor. Dillons shrugged and said helplessly. That seems to be the only way. Yangqing slowly pulled out the long sword behind him, then raised his hands, his eyes widened, and strength was brewing. At this moment, a large number of Marines in black suits rushed over again. Anilu's eyes turned cold, and he strode over. After 3 steps, he turned into lightning and disappeared in place. When he appeared again, he was standing in the middle of all the navy and black suits. God, you will feel the pain. Ziz. A series of thunder and lightning were released, and screams came one after another. At this moment, thunder and lightning is simply the most powerful killer, and no one can stop it. And Dillons was also shocked by Anilu's fighting power. This kid is absolutely powerful and extraordinary. Either reaction or attack. Yangqing's eyes were fixed on the Heilushi handcuffs in Dillons's hands. The Longchen sword in his hand quietly increased its strength, and the faint blue light bloomed, and Yulong seemed to make a faint roar in it. The next moment, a blue light flashed suddenly, and the long sword was almost invisible. Just for a moment, a strong wind blows. Dillons was stunned for a moment, and the Heilushi handcuffs on his wrist were torn apart, turned into pieces of debris, and fell to the ground. Liberated, Dillons stood up, stretched his muscles and bones, and smiled happily. At this time, Anilu also dealt with the sailors on the entire sea train. He walked over slowly with a stick and saw the liberated Dillons. The corner of his mouth was slightly crooked, and his expression was a little cold. Thank you, newcomer. Dillons greeted God. Anilu tilted his head and ignored Dillons. Haha, Anilu has such a personality. Yangqing patted Dillons on the shoulder, who touched his nose. Anilu stopped and turned around abruptly. Mortal, don't speak ill of me behind my back. Ha 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 ha. Yangqing and Dillons both laughed out loud. 3 minutes later, the 3 of them came to the control room of the sea train, and said to the train driver with cold expressions, accelerate, rush towards Judicial Island, don't stop in the middle. Yes, but this will hit the Judicial Island, the driver said with a look of horror. A cold smile appeared on Yangqing's face. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Just want you to bump into him. Anilu raised her eyebrows, not understanding the meaning of doing so. Dillons's expression changed and he grabbed Yangqing. Captain, do you know the consequences of doing this? Of course I do. Yangqing chuckled lightly. Are we really ready to be the enemy of the entire world's imperial court? Dillons said solemnly, fine sweat dripping from his nose. Yangqing looked at Dillons's face, and then said seriously, Dillons, you have become a little more careful. Then he turned his head and looked at Judiciary Island, which was getting closer and closer, and said almost coldly. Since they caught you and escorted you to Judiciary Island, I've been ready to fight, and what I'm going to do next will make us break through completely. This is inevitable. Dylan's pupils shrank, and his face became a little complicated. He clenched his fists and released them quietly. 5 seconds later, looking at the judicial island in front of him, his face suddenly relaxed. Then, let's try the weight of the world court. With a smile on Yang Qing's face, he patted Dylan's on the shoulder. That's exactly what it is. Today, give them a greeting first. A gift to witness the rise of the Death God Pirates. Chapter 105 The Burning Banner. The sea train roared, making a whining sound, shaking the sea track, and rushing towards the Judiciary Island ahead. The driver looked at the Judiciary Island, which was getting closer and closer, and his face turned green with fright. Beside him, Yang Qing's eyes were sharp, their faces were expressionless, and there was no panic at all. Woo 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 woo. A minute later, the sea train issued a crisp whistle, and then slammed towards the gate of Judiciary Island. This terrifying scene was instantly seen by the soldiers stationed on Judicial Island. That is, the sea train. Bump over, bump over. Quick, 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 fire the warning shot. A series of gunshots of bang 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 spread all over the Judiciary Island. The soldiers stationed on the island attacked and assembled, and ran out in groups with nervousness and confusion on their faces. Judicial Island is a symbol of the imperial court in the world. Under normal circumstances, no one dares to make trouble. This is a more solid barrier than a fortress, and it will never be breached. What kind of medicine did this sea train take? Boom. The deafening sound spread out, and the buildings in Judicial Island were knocked down by the sea train. The three of Yang Qing got out of the sea train and glanced around. A large number of sea soldiers had come and surrounded them. At a glance, this wide square is enough to accommodate thousands of people. Crack clap. A series of gunshots sounded, and countless guns were aimed at the three. The driver only woke up at this moment, and when he stuck his head out and saw such a shocking scene, with an "ah" sound, his eyes turned white and he passed out. He was actually stunned. Thousands of people surrounded Yang Qing and the three of them, appearing to be extra careful. They squatted halfway and moved forward slowly. They surrounded the three of them tightly, with their right hands on the trigger, ready to do anything at any time. The three of them stood in the arena with expressionless faces. Anilu swung his long stick and pointed straight ahead, with a contemptuous smile on his face. He was extremely disdainful. He was most not afraid of such a scene. The blue electric light had begun to flicker on his body, and the high heat of the explosion caused the air to scorch. Let me come. At this moment, Yang Qing took a step to stop Anilu's movements. Dylan's eyes lit up, then glanced at Dylan's and said with a smile, "Rookie, look at the captain. Death, Lucifer, Ghost, Dylan's, and this rogue boy, you have been surrounded." At this time, a sailor colonel jumped out and said loudly to the crowd, asking Anilu's face darkened, but before he could finish speaking, Yang Qing had closed his eyes, and then opened them suddenly. Buzz. The Overlord is domineering, and the majestic domineering aura instantly spreads in all directions. This terrifying momentum stunned down, causing cracks to appear in the surrounding walls. Like a gust of wind, it roared and roared past, passing countless sea soldiers. In an instant, the sea soldiers were like waves, their eyes turned white one after another, and they fell softly. It was the colonel who shouted, and his eyes widened, and then he fell to the ground swaying. Seeing this scene, Anilu looked at Yang Qing in shock. What is that terrifying aura? Yang Qing took one step at a time, and the deterrent force of the Overlord domineering became more and more domineering and powerful. Countless sailors fell to the ground, and the sailors of different strengths were vulnerable in the face of this momentum. 5 steps later, Yang Qing withdrew his aura and said to Anilu, "Anilu, cast your thunder and lightning, cover the entire island, and make a big havoc. If you can destroy this island, that's the best." The words were filled with a strong murderous intent. This time, the World Court targeted Dylan's, making him extremely angry. Moreover, since the Death God Pirates debuted, it is time for the world to see their power clearly. Since there is going to be a riot, then simply turn the world upside down. Hey, then I'll be welcome. Anilu smiled coldly, turned into thunder and rose into the sky, and then began to gather thunderclouds. The sea soldiers kept rushing towards this place. Yangqing suppressed the audience, and the fruit ability spread to 2,000 meters, almost instantly, can make these sea soldiers lose their resistance. The thunderclouds in the sky, under the control of Anilu, became larger and larger, and gradually formed a radius of 4 or 5 kilometers, covering almost the entire island. A dark cloud made the people of Judicial Island look up in shock. On this day, Judicial Island was plunged into darkness. You must know that Judiciary Island is an island that never sleeps, known as the island that never sleeps. But on this day, the sun could not be seen. Another 5 minutes passed, and the dark clouds were even bigger, with bursts of thunder and lightning flashing between them. Anilu stood in it, his figure looming, surrounded by thunder dragons, like the god of thunder. This guy is so strong, Dylan said in shock as he looked at Anilu in the sky. The fruit of nature, combined with the domineering and domineering, is indeed very powerful. Yangqing nodded with a smile. It's just that he lacks in physical skills, and he has a lot of potential. Boom! Thick thunder and lightning began to flicker in the sky, causing the entire island to tremble. This scene is very terrifying, as if the end of the world is coming, and the Judicial Island ushered in the wrath of Thor. Dong 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 dong. Amidst the clouds, Anilu had a cold face, turned his long stick, and slammed the thunder drum behind him. God's sanction is coming. Boom! In the sky, thick thunder and lightning began to slash towards Judicial Island. Roaring and roaring, it descended on the entire island, bringing a large amount of scorched blackened smoke. In an instant, everyone on the Judiciary Island began to panic. There was the sailor standing outside, struck by lightning. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. He was hit and fell directly to the ground, foaming at the mouth. There are also people in the building who were struck by the high-temperature lightning, the houses collapsed, and countless people died. Thunderclouds lingered constantly, and frantic thunder and lightning ravaged the entire Judicial Island. It lasted for 10 minutes, and when the thundercloud dissipated, the entire Judiciary Island had become devastated. There were pitch-black scorch marks everywhere, and the building collapsed a lot, as if it had been bombarded by merciless artillery fire. That flag, which represents the union of countless countries in the world, is burning with a raging flame at this moment, making countless sailors face panic and fear to the extreme. Nice job, Anilu, Dylan said loudly. Anilu fell from the sky and nodded grimly. Let's go. If you don't go, the top force of the sea soldiers is coming. Yangqing's eyes flashed. He knew that the general of the sea soldiers was very close to here. Maybe he was on the way to set off at this time. Marine Corps Headquarters. Sengoku patted the table angrily. Damn, I didn't pay attention to them all the time, and it caused such a big disaster. The warring states, who had just received the news, was about to jump up. The Death God pirates actually destroyed Judiciary Island. Chapter 106 The Yellow Ape. What kind of sin is this? Also, where did this group of people come from to destroy Judiciary Island? Do intelligence agencies eat shit? What is their situation at the moment? The warring states found that they didn't know anything. I don't know when it started. This group of people seemed to disappear from their eyes. Is it the hands and feet of his Tianlong man again? Warring states' face became extremely gloomy. I have grown to this point without knowing it. Kazuna. Warring states pondered for a while, then suddenly raised his head and shouted. Huh. Kazaru woke up from his sleep and looked at the warring states with a puzzled face. Go to Judicial Island immediately, and make sure to leave that group behind. Warring states said sharply. This time, he was really furious. Representing the authority of the imperial court in the world, Judicial Island was inexplicably destroyed. Are these people going to heaven? This is really not good news. Huang Yuan scratched his head and had a headache. That group of people can destroy the Judicial Island. Maybe they are in control of something amazing. let me go alone, is it really okay? Come on, they'll run away if it's too late. Warring States said solemnly, his face very serious. At this moment, there is only a Kizaru in the Marine Corps headquarters. Others, such as Aokiji, are in contact with members of the Chiwahai Sea, and they are like Akainu, who are responsible for the Marines stationed in the New World. For a while, there was really no powerful person sent out. It is Garp, who is also responsible for contacting the Tianlong people at this moment and handing over the tribute items. As for Huang Yuan, the Warring States period is still very reassuring. First, as a general, and he has strength and qualifications, it can be said that it is easy to suppress ordinary pirates. Second, he has the ability to shine fruit. Even if the opponent's strength exceeds the estimate, he can still escape. Kizaru patted his head, and his eyes under the sunglasses shone with golden light. A second later, the entire body turned into particles of light and disappeared in the Marine Corps headquarters. On the Judicial Island, Yangqing and the three looked at the sea soldiers who were still surrounded by a few people with fear on their faces. These sailors didn't do much harm to them. Boom, boom, boom. A series of artillery shells slammed towards the three of them. Dylan's waved his hand, and the large space in front of him was distorted. The shells appeared from the crowd, and then bursts of flames soaring into the sky. Call. Leave here, today, we have done enough. Yangqing's eyes flashed and he said quickly. Ha ha ha, well, I've seen my bounty increase several times. Dylan said with a smile, and then looked at Anilu, this newcomer. I'm afraid this time it will be a sky-high price. The three looked at each other and took a step towards the door. But in the next moment, their expressions changed. Two huge shadows shrouded their heads, obscuring a large swath of sunlight. Giants. Dylan's looked up and saw two giants, with huge axes in their hands, standing there, like a mountain, heavy and thick. Dylan's, I don't have time to pay attention to them. Let's go. Yangqing snorted coldly, snapped his right fingers, and a faint mask of 2 kilometers in a radius spread out. The next moment, the two giants had horrified expressions on their faces, and then fell heavily to the ground, crushing countless buildings, but they could no longer move. Let's go. Dylan's nodded. The power of space suddenly dissipated, covering Yangqing and Anilu, and along with the distortion of space, the sea surface 1,000 meters away had appeared. At the moment before it fell, there was another flash, and the three disappeared again and appeared again. In such a cycle, it is constantly advancing rapidly on the sea. 3 minutes later, sweat appeared on Dylan's forehead, and his face turned pale. His ability can indeed be said to be against the sky, and it will be more terrifying as it develops, but it consumes too much physical strength. I'm still too weak. This time, never give up. Dylan's gritted his teeth and continued to lead the three of them forward. He wanted to challenge his own limits and break through him. After another 3 minutes, Dylan's was drenched in sweat. Yangqing's eyes flashed, but he didn't say anything, but Anilu's mouth was full of disdain. No, don't hold back. I'm okay, Dylan said stiffly, his body trembled, and he moved again. It was because of this frail body, his poor physical strength, that he was caught. Otherwise, with his ability, where can he go? How could it be targeted by a little-known pirate group and reduced to what it was just now? He wants to get stronger and stronger. A minute later, Dylan's gasped for breath, but he was still flashing on the sea. At this time, Yangqing's eyes narrowed, and he looked back, and Anilu also had a coldness on his face. Someone is following us closely, speed, very fast. Anilu said coldly. Dylan's, send us to the boat ahead, it seems that we can't escape. Yangqing looked at the golden light in the distance and realized who it was. Okay. As soon as Dylan's exerted his strength, the three of them appeared on the deck the next moment. This is a cargo ship filled with large packages. There are not many sailors, about a dozen or so, but the ship is very large. When the three suddenly appeared on the boat, everyone was surprised. When were they on the boat? These three people are so weird, as if they suddenly appeared on the boat without any warning. However, Yangqing and the three had no time to pay attention to the people on the boat. There was almost a flash of golden light in front of their eyes, and then particles of light appeared in front of them, and then slowly. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. A human body appeared. He was wearing a white cloak of justice on his back, a huang-colored plaid suit, with eyes. His expression seemed a bit exaggerated and wretched, and he was looking at the three of them casually. It was General Kizaru, Pulsolino. Yo, is it just 3 people? It really surprised me. There was a hint of surprise on Kizaru's face. He was really surprised. He thought it was a pirate group, but it turned out that there were only 3 of them. 3 people, destroying an island. How do you think about this? How can it make people feel incredible? Is there a newcomer? Seeing Analu, Kizaru smiled wickedly. Then his right index finger stretched out, flashing a golden light. Yangqing's face was expressionless, and his body was filled with killing intent. Dylan's also had a cold face. As for Analu, this guy who was not afraid of the sky and was full of violent genes was indifferent. I actually met a general here, it's really not what I wanted. Yangqing said coldly, but since I met, then kill it. He stretched his right hand to his back and slowly pulled out the Longchen sword, pointing directly at the yellow monkey. Chapter 107 Group Fight. Kill me. You've been underestimated. Kizaru laughed. The light above his index finger suddenly flashed, and the next moment he rushed out, heading towards Analu's heart. Analu's face was indifferent, and he didn't care about this electric light at all. Yangqing and Dylan's moved instantly, the daggers flickered coldly, and the blue light above the Longchen sword flourished. The next moment, both of them suddenly disappeared into the air. View. The laser light penetrated Analu's chest, causing a series of thunder and lightning, causing a trace of surprise on Kizaru's face, and then his face changed drastically and he jumped back suddenly. However, it was still a step too late. The dagger passed through his head, and the dark blue blade slashed directly across his chest. There was a soft sound of pop, blood splashed and dripped on the deck, making a clear sound. At this time, behind the crowd, where many goods were placed, there was a loud noise, but it was Kizaru's laser that had exploded, setting off a wave of fire, causing the sailors on the boat to flee everywhere, with a face on their faces. A look of fear. Next, the figures of Yangqing and Dylan's gradually emerged, looking at Kizaru indifferently. If you are so careless, you will die, General Kizaru. The cold voice made Kizaru's expression instantly cold. He was already careful enough, and every second he stood here, he was carefully observing the strength of the 3 people on the opposite side. However, what he never expected was that the raw face would actually be a natural type. In front of the 2 people, their strength is also terrifying. Its speed came to him in an instant. When he realized that he was about to dodge, he actually reacted a beat slower. At Shang's mouth, faint bloodstains appeared, and there was blood seeping out, dyeing his clothes blood red. Huang Yuan narrowed his eyes and looked at the sword in Yangqing's hand. Was that sword actually made of Heilu stone? When he was slashed just now, there was a hint of weakness all over his body, which was a unique feeling caused by the breath of the sea. The dagger first stabbed him in the head, forcing him to be elementalized, and then the long sword arrived and directly cut off his elemental incarnation body, just in time for his most difficult elemental transformation and the greatest possible dodge. These 2 people are very scary. Huang Yuan's eyes were very solemn, and the boy he was facing directly started to flash blue lightning rays of light on his body, which gave Huang Yuan a headache. Is it the strongest thunder fruit of the natural system? It's really scary. Crackling. A series of lightning slashed towards Kizaru. The latter became elemental, and the lightning struck the ship, causing countless scorch marks. Then in an instant, the figures of Analu and Kizaru disappeared into the air. Zitsa. The 2 appeared in midair. The long stick and the long sword completed a confrontation, emitting a brilliant light, and the lightning and the light collided, regardless of the top and bottom. Huang Yuan looked a little dignified, and in terms of speed, the 2 were almost on the same level. And the other party also seems to be in control of the domineering and can completely control his whereabouts. This enemy is very difficult to deal with. On the deck, Yang Qing's face was grim, his right hand trembled slightly, and with a sound of boom, a light mask spread out, instantly covering the yellow ape above the sky. Then, his eyes narrowed, and the Longchen sword in his hand was thrown into the air. Under the control of the ability, it turned into a blue light and rushed towards the ladder. Yujian flying. Dylan's was stunned. He saw Yang Qing standing on the deck at the moment, pointing his right hand into a sword, directing the Longchen sword to continuously attack Keizuka. At first, the Longchen sword was still swaying and seemed to be unstable, but after a few seconds, it stopped steadily in the air. Then it turned into a blue light and stabbed towards the yellow monkey in the sky. Huh! Huang Yuan felt the strong wind under his feet, his pupils shrank, and then immediately avoided it. Just as he deviates from the original position, a blue light passed in front of him, startling Huang Yuan with a cold sweat. This sword even pointed at his chrysanthemum, vowing to pierce all his shit. The next moment, Analu's long stick swept directly towards him, causing Huang Yuan to frantically raise his sword to resist, but in an instant, the blue light came towards his head again, causing the latter's complexion to change greatly. The attacks of Analu and Yang Qing completely suppressed Kizaru, making the latter almost unable to counterattack at all, and was in an endless passive state. In front of Analu, his speed of light lost its effect. Instead, the two combined to completely plunge him into passive. Hey, I'll take a shot too. Dylan's took a step and disappeared in place. The next moment, he appeared in front of Kizaru. With a slash of the dagger, a cold light flashed past. Poof! This time, it actually hurt Kizaru, and a bloodstain was drawn on his arm, making the latter's complexion change. Between the index finger of the right hand, a golden light flashed, and then the light burst. Laser light. Dylan's figure suddenly twisted, and the laser light directly penetrated his body and blasted into the sea behind him, burning a cloud of white mist. These three people. Huang Yuan's expression changed. He didn't expect the three people in front of him to have such power. As the intelligence department of the naval soldiers eating shit, the abilities of these three people have not been proven. His eyes kept swept to the three people present, and the abilities of these three people were extremely terrifying. This guy is a natural thunder fruit. He looked at Analu and judged that the latter's whole body was flashing with thunder, and the long stick was constantly waving towards him. This guy is a space fruit. The eyes that looked at Dylan's were also extremely solemn. And him. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. In the end, Kizaru turned to Yang Qing, full of solemnity and caution. He could not judge the latter's fruit ability, which was beyond his expectations. Zitsa. Kiwi, who had been passive all the time, was struck by lightning from Analu. His hair stood on end, his whole body trembled, black eyes appeared, and he was paralyzed for a moment. Also at the same moment, Yang Qing's eyes froze below, and his right hand suddenly tightened. The face of the yellow ape in the sky changed greatly. He actually felt that he could not move, and could not be elementalized. Not good. The blue light flashed and passed straight through him. Blood burst out suddenly, and a large rain of blood fell in the sky. However, before it was over, Analu's long stick with lightning stabbed him in the stomach with a grin, and with a poof, his clothes burned, and a hole appeared in his stomach. There was a look of pain on Kizaru's face. Dylan's didn't miss this opportunity. The dagger slid across Kizaru's neck. The latter endured the discomfort and raised his head to the rear. Saw. Blood was drawn from the neck, and blood droplets dripped downward, and the pupils of the yellow monkey suddenly widened. He never imagined that he would fall into such a desperate situation. In just an instant, Kizaru was seriously injured. Chapter 108 Rage. The cooperation of the three at this moment is almost perfect. Analu's thunder and lightning paralyzed the latter. Yang Qing directly imprisoned the body of the yellow monkey, making it unable to move, unable to elementalize. Although facing such a powerhouse, it can only be completed for a moment. but this short time, but enough. Boom. The blood dripped and splashed on the deck, and the blood beads fell to pieces. At this moment, the scene stopped. Analu's long stick was facing forward, with a grim smile on his face. Dylan's expression was gloomy and icy, and Yang Qing's feet on the deck slowly flew towards the sky. Kizaru's eyes shrank, feeling like his lungs were on fire. His face became extremely pale, and he knew that he had been seriously injured. But the battle is not over yet, and the three people in front of them are staring at them all the time. I didn't expect that I would be planted here. There was a hint of helplessness in Huang Yuan's heart. On the deck below, the sailors watched in horror at the battle in the air, trying to hide everywhere, but couldn't find a place. Although they couldn't recognize the three people, they recognized the identity of the great General Kizaru in an instant. But at this moment, this invincible existence among the Marines was badly injured, gasping for breath and standing in the air, acting very weak. Who are these three people? The sailors felt that the world was so crazy that the general was beaten like this. That is an invincible existence. How can it be reduced to what it is now? It seems that you won't let me leave here easily. Huang Yuan sighed, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. In the short confrontation, he was already injured, and his body was full of internal injuries. Analu sneered, turned into thunder and lightning and appeared behind Kizaru again, while Dylan's flashed panting and slashed the dagger towards the latter. At this time, Dylan's physical strength was close to the lower limit, but he was still not afraid of Kizaru. On the other hand, Yang Qing had already kept the Longchen sword in his hands. I said, today, if you are not careful, you will die. Yang Qing sneered, do you think I am joking? His right hand clenched suddenly, and the air shook at this moment. A bang sound came out, and the air was compressed into a cannonball, which slammed into Kizaru fiercely. Huh! The yellow monkey's face changed, turned into particles of light, disappeared in place, and wanted to escape in the distance. But in just an instant, Analu appeared above it, and a stick was condescending with thunder and lightning, and it was pressed down suddenly. Bang! The latter raised his sword to meet him. His face was very pale, and he was gasping for breath. At this moment, Dylan's appeared again, and the dagger slid viciously towards his neck. Kizaru's body slowly turned into a particle of light, dodging the blow. Cut! Dylan's was a little helpless as he spat out in disdain. Don't try to run away, General Yellow Ape. Yang Qing stepped on the sky and walked towards here step by step. Every time he took a step, the air was shaking and the sky was shaking. Overlord color. Huang Yuan's pupils were round, and he was very shocked. That arrogance and domineering, it is absolutely domineering and domineering. This kid has grown to such a level. In the future, who else can stop him? The right hand slowly stretched out. Yang Qing aimed his palm at the yellow monkey, and with its terrifying aura rising, the surrounding sea and air were shaking. The sea was boiling, whirlpools began to appear, and the air became heavier and heavier, and Kizaru felt that a vacuum had begun to appear around him. What kind of ability does this kid have? The yellow monkey turned pale and hurriedly turned his body into light. But in the next moment, endless sea water and air squeezed towards him. The huge pressure caused him to spit out a mouthful of blood in an instant, and his face turned pale again. The huge force even sent him flying 100 meters and fell towards the sea. Analu turned into a lightning bolt and followed Kizaru closely, not intending to let the latter go. The long stick hit the drum behind it, and the terrifying thunder dragon drilled out of it and roared towards Kyabu. Bachi Changguyu, Huang Yuan shouted, and endless rays of light erupted from his body. The next moment, countless shining light bombs attacked the three of them overwhelmingly. The dense attack covered the front 300 meters, and the high heat and concentrated light were full of bursting aura. Yang Qing's face changed, and his right hand suddenly tightened. Boom boom boom. A series of explosions sounded, and endless rays of light bloomed, stabbing the three of them unable to open their eyes. 3 seconds later, when the three of them opened their eyes, they looked forward and couldn't help but be stunned. Run! Dylan's was stunned. A ray of light in front was refracted as it shuttled through the void, and in just 3 seconds, it was already tens of thousands of meters away. This kind of speed is really terrifying. Cut. Anilu was very disdainful. This guy is the most powerful general in Qinghai. Really weak. Yang Qing laughed and said seriously, "Don't underestimate him, we have 3 people. Fighting alone, you should stay away from him at this moment." Nature is a person with the ability to shine fruit, with a sense of sight, a domineering look, and a wealth of combat experience. Even if I meet this guy alone, I have to fight with all my strength. After speaking, Yang Qing smiled again. Of course, this time he found the 3 of us. It can be said to be courting death, haha. Anilu raised his eyebrows, his face was smug, and Dylan's also laughed out loud. The 3 of them joined together and beat the general hard, which was still very cool. After all, this is the general. Afterwards, the 3 of them left here and headed towards the 7 waters. 15 minutes later, the trio fell on 7. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. In the capital of water, he and Luo's group completed the confluence. At this moment, they are watching the ship at the shipyard. This time the new ship must be large enough to accommodate the huge forces established after they arrived in the New World. At the same time, Huang Yuan ran for half an hour, panting heavily, before reaching the nearest sea soldier, and then trembling and shaking, he took out the phone bug in his arms and dialed it out with difficulty. "Hey, Kizaru, I'm Warring States, have you completed your mission?" Warring States said solemnly. "The mission failed, I was seriously injured, you sent someone to pick me up, Division 1029. Kizaru endured the pain and said briefly, Shang's mouth, neck, and injuries all over his body made him feel every word he said. Excruciating pain. After saying these words, Huang Yuan's hands softened, the phone bug fell to the ground, and he closed his eyes. He needs to rest well. The naval headquarters, the Warring States period turned into stone, and it took 5 seconds for him to react. "Kazuna, you failed." Bang! Warring States fiercely slapped his palm on the wooden table in front of him, and then shouted angrily, "Where's the intelligence department? Give me a different group of people, these shit-eaters." The Death God pirates have the power to seriously injure the general. How did the intelligence department investigate? This shocking news made the Warring States furious. This time, the marshal was really furious. Chapter 109 Headquarters Emergency Meeting. 1 day later, the seriously injured Kizaru was placed in the hospital of the Marine Corps headquarters. Looking at the injuries on his body, the Warring States looked solemn and his face was gloomy, and he did not say a word. Kizaru closed his eyes and had already fallen into a coma. He lost too much blood, and the injury this time was too serious. I don't know how many years, this general has not suffered such a serious injury. A thick gauze was tied around his body, the severe wounds on his mouth, the scorch marks on his stomach, and countless small wounds all over his body made Warring States' pupils shrunk. What kind of battle did he go through? Warring States' eyes were solemn, and he felt faintly that this time, he had completely missed the Death God pirates. This group of people who have been wandering in the 4 seas finally released their hideous wildness at this moment, and it was also the first time that their horror was truly shown to the world. Destroyed an island and seriously injured a general, this is their terrifying fighting power. 1 day later, Kizaru woke up, and the Warring States inquired carefully about the situation of the battle. His eyes were already extremely solemn, and then he summoned the soldiers with the rank of Major General and above in the main positions of the Navy headquarters at a very fast speed, and asked them to come to the Navy headquarters gather to participate in important meetings. Marine headquarters, conference room. Yesterday, General Kizaru and the Death God pirates met in many waters of Poland. The Warring States opened the map and circled the sea with a pen. His eyes were gloomy and his voice was low. The cause of this incident is that, quote, destruction of Justice Island. At noon yesterday, Dillons, the deputy captain of the Death Pirates, was brought into the 7 waters by Lieutenant Admiral Orlando, and then exchanged with Lieutenant General Clays. Lieutenant General Clays was responsible for escorting Dillon's going to Judicial Island for trial. This is absolute justice, and the Navy has always been tough when dealing with the evil pirates. The voice of the warring states became louder, and then his eyes trembled. Everyone present noticed this detail, and they all raised their brows and listened carefully. However, the Judiciary Island was destroyed. From 1 to 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon, the Death God pirates destroyed the entire Judiciary Island. Hiss! A voice of inhalation came out, and everyone present looked at each other, their eyes full of shock and inconceivable. They all know where Judicial Island is, and such a place was destroyed by the pirates. How can that be? Afterwards, according to Naval Intelligence investigation, the entire Judiciary Island was bombarded with thunder, as if the wrath of the sky, and many buildings on Judiciary Island collapsed and charred all over. And according to the information we got, there are only 3 people in the Death God pirates. The words of the warring states period caused another gasp. He glanced at everyone, then walked to the conference table, picked up a few photos on the table, and threw them on the table. Everyone looked at the photo and saw an arrogant, cold-hearted man with thunder and lightning covering his body. He looked ruthless and cruel. It was Anilu. Anilu. Naturally, he is a thunder fruit eater, and he has mastered the experience. According to the preliminary judgment, he has launched the power to destroy an island. All the major generals and even the generals looked at the person in the photo. This kid instantly attracted the attention of countless people. Such a terrifying person can indeed attract everyone's attention. Also, their captain. Another photo was thrown out, and everyone looked at it again, but it was Yongqing. They saw him in the photo, smiling, sitting casually on the bow of the boat, with a long cloth wrap on his back, looking harmless to humans and animals. Don't be fooled by his harmless appearance. This person is the captain of the Death God gang, Lucifer. Previously, a bounty of 100 million Bailey was offered, and he rarely showed his strength in front of others. Even until this time, his abilities are still unknown, but he only knows that his swordsmanship is exceptionally superb. And he controls the tyrannical arrogance. Warring states said slowly. Countless people took a breath and were shocked. It turned out to be a domineering king. Such a person is really dangerous. Finally, he threw out a picture of Dillon's. Deputy Captain Dillon's, a space-type devil fruit-capable person, nicknamed Ghost, Haunted, the intractable and potential space-type ability, I think everyone can imagine, known as the most dangerous superhuman-type devil fruit, its the power is unimaginable. These 3 people are the root cause of the destruction of the entire Judicial Island. 3 people, it turned out that 3 people really destroyed Judicial Island. If it was before, who said that 3 people would destroy the entire Judicial Island, they would definitely be ridiculed. But after today, not anymore. After that, about half an hour later, the 3 of them made contact with General Kazaru in many waters of Poland. Zhangguo walked towards the map again, pointing to the red circle that began to be drawn. Here, General Kazaru and 3 people fought on a cargo ship, and in the end, they were seriously injured and defeated. At this moment, they are still in the hospital. Warring states said coldly, causing everyone present to open their mouths in shock, unable to make a sound. General, you actually lost. Where are these 3 people sacred? Immediately afterwards, Sengoku spoke again. His voice was heavy and cold. There is no doubt that these 3 people will set off a huge wave after today. Their evil deeds will be known to the whole world. And I am very disappointed that such a dangerous person, before that, our intelligence services have no knowledge of their information. The voice of the warring states was cold. 3 seconds later, there was a sound outside the door, and a big man with a national character with the rank of lieutenant general was escorted in, looking at the warring states with a terrified face. Lieutenant General Roca, head of naval intelligence, I don't want to hold you accountable for your dereliction of duty, and I don't want to pay attention to it. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Who have you ordered to hide the strength and whereabouts of this group of people, because your end is already doomed? Then, Sengoku waved his hand, and the soldiers quickly pushed the latter out. "Forgive your life, Marshal, spare your life, I was wrong, I know I was wrong." In the corridor, Lieutenant General Roca's voice got farther and farther, and finally became indistinct. "From today onwards, our intelligence department, and even all systems will be cleaned again." Sengoku finished this sentence with a blank expression, and then turned the topic to the death group again. "In addition, this dangerous group of pirates, their level of danger should also be re-established." He rested his hands on the long table, and the metal inlaid in front of Shang swayed and shone brightly, and said solemnly and seriously, "I don't want this time, someone will even do small tricks behind my back, because that ending is inevitable. It would be miserable." In a word, the eyes of countless people present tightened and became nervous. Chapter 110 Shocking All Parties. Immediately after, Sengoku waved his hand, and someone brought up a stack of photos again, but it was the detailed information of the entire Death Pirates. It can be seen that in a very short period of time, the Warring States period also made great efforts. After all, this time, things were too big, even he was very dignified. "We have re-obtained information, a detailed piece of information about the Death God Pirates. This includes all the information they have in the Four Seas and the Great Waterway." Then, Warring States took out the photos one by one, put them on the table, and introduced them carefully. Glades, the Death Pirates, the chef, the fruit of the air, with a simple and honest character. Drizzt, navigator, card fruit. Telfagaro, surgeon. Speaking of this, Warring States paused, as if he had remembered something, and said complicatedly, "A person with the ability to operate the fruit." Nicole Robin, Devil's Son, flower fruit. Moria, physician. Bucky the Clown, the captain of the First Division, torn apart fruit, and was a trainee crew member on the One Piece ship before. Sengoku introduced everyone one by one, looking at everyone who was surprised. His eyes were also complicated. He never thought that in a blink of an eye, the pirate group had grown to 9 people. Finally, Ani Lu, Dylan's and their captain, Lucifer. After introducing everyone, the Warring States just breathed a sigh of relief. This group of people is too dangerous. In terms of newcomers, these guys have extremely terrifying potential. I am afraid they are the most terrifying group of newcomers in the past 2 years. Now, start negotiating. 3 days later, mark their level of danger to me, and issue a new reward order. Holy Land, Mary Joa. In an empty hall, 5 dignified and robust old men sat casually, and in their hands were the detailed information of the Death God Pirates. "This group of people is very dangerous," one of the 5 old men said solemnly. "If things go on like this, if we don't stop them, it is very likely that another 4 emperors will appear. I heard that their captain, this guy with a good temperament, is a Tianlong person, seems to be from Alpha's family. It's really interesting, the fact that such a terrifying young man appeared in the Tianlong people made the old man very surprised. It's a pity that my clan was sentenced, and I could only ruthlessly kill it." The 5 old men were discussing each and every one of them, as if they were chatting casually. "That's not true. If he is strong enough to change the dynasty and make the whole world his, that's not bad." An old man suddenly laughed and said loudly, causing the others to look at him and start thinking. "You're right. If he conquers the whole world, the final result will be nothing more than that." The other 4 old men looked at each other and said with a smile, "The world still belongs to the Tianlong people, ha 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 ha. So, what should we do with them? Let's see how he can get in the end. If I admire him, why not give him everything of the old man?" The other 4 looked at the old man again with shock in their eyes. 3 days later, a piece of news swept the whole world, causing countless people to be shocked. At the same time, it was accompanied by a new reward order, which caused a large number of pirates to be shocked. Captain of the Death God Pirates, Death God, Lucifer, with a bounty of 550 million Bailey. Just the first copy caused the shock of countless people. The little-known Yangqing was instantly known to the whole world. Everyone was shocked by the huge bounty, and some people felt that it was not worthy of the name, and started to set off, preparing to claim his head in exchange for the bounty. Deputy Captain of the Death God Pirates, Ghost, Dillons, a bounty of 460 million Bailey. Navigator, Drizzt, there is a bounty of 200 million Baileys. Chef, Glades, there is a bounty of 150 million. Nicole Robin, son of the devil, with a bounty of 120 million. Bucky the Clown, there is a bounty of 210 million Baileys. Telfagaro, surgeon, with a bounty of 100 million Baileys. Moria, physician, with a bounty of 50 million Baileys. The last one is Anilu, who is arrogant and indifferent, and the light of thunder and lightning fills his body. A series of numbers appear very domineering. Thunder Any Road, the bounty is 430 million Baileys. It was only 30 million lower than Dillon's, which surprised everyone. The bounty orders scattered in all directions, filling the entire world in an instant. Countless people saw this reward order at this moment, and then they were extremely shocked. In the Don Quixote family, Brother Doflamingo saw Luo Na's bounty of 100 million, narrowed his eyes, and whispered, "Luo, I will not let you go." Crocodile Pirates, the crocodile at this time has reached 85 million. It can be said that the first half of the big pirate is full of energy and superb strength, but when it sees Yang Qing's reward order, its pupils are violent. Shrink, and finally sigh deeply. Only those who have been in contact with that kid can know the strangeness and unfathomability of him. 550 million. What a terrible boy. Ocean. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. This time, the soldiers have completely invested their money. Those who can seriously injure the generals and destroy the judicial island really attach great importance to them, which can be seen from the bounty. New World, a huge ship with a white beard and a tall giant slammed after drinking a bottle of wine, looked at Yang Qing on the bounty and made a loud voice. "Ha ha ha ha, it seems New World there's a funny kid coming." In another place, a young man with red hair held a stack of reward orders in his hand, with a happy smile on his face. "You really didn't disappoint me, Lucifer." This person is the red-haired Shanks, and then he waved his hand. "Brothers, turn the bow, and we are heading to the Great Channel." Everyone was puzzled and looked at Shanks. "Our friend is coming. I decided to get him a bottle of good wine first. When he comes to the New World, I will welcome him grandly." Shanks' words brought smiles to the faces of the crew. Only hometown wine is good wine, and the place Shanks is going is exactly Mary Joa. Chapter 111, The Transaction with Espagu. Once on the Reaper, the two had a few words of conversation, but Shanks deeply remembered them in his heart. A promise, no matter what the price is, it must be fulfilled. This is the big mind of the big pirate, the powerhouse of the four emperors. "Let's go, brothers." The redhead gave a long laugh, and the crew behind him agreed loudly. The Seven Waters, the Death God Pirates. At this moment, everyone has their own reward orders in their hands, staring at the new reward orders. Everyone's expressions are different, some are shocked, some are happy, and some are complicated. "Ha ha ha, the sea soldiers really like me. 460 million. Dillons laughed loudly, and Anilu next to him looked at his numbers in the photo, and pouted his lips in disdain, very dissatisfied. Bucky jumped around excitedly and became a big pirate of 210 million. How much more than 10 times his worth. It was a big accident, which made him so happy that he was about to fly into the sky. Drizzt, on the other hand, had a pious face, and chose one of the 3 cards in front of him to calculate his good and bad luck. Drizzt breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the cards he had drawn. "The flying dragon is in the sky, it looks like I'm going to be lucky." Drizzt smiled. Glades, Luo, Mariah, and Robin didn't seem to care much, just glanced at the bounty and put it aside. Yang Qing gently put his bounty aside, and a chuckle appeared at the corner of his mouth. He also did not expect that his bounty would increase so much at one time. 550 million, what kind of attention is this? There are not many of the 4 emperor pirates who have such a bounty. In the original work, such a level is considered a top pirate. More importantly, with the growth of the bounty, the reputation of the death pirates will also increase significantly. In the original book, why did Blackbeard desperately want to destroy the high-value pirates in order to elevate his status? Not just for fame. With fame, you will have greater power and greater power. Among the 4 emperors, each emperor has a huge territory and has countless forces under his command. Otherwise, with only 7 or 8 people, can we stand firm in a place like the New World? In the New World, Yang Qingzi naturally needs a great reputation and a strong own strength. Now that he has the fame, what he needs is his partners, brothers and sisters, to become stronger. Don't be careless. Yang Qing looked at the people in front of him and said solemnly, with the increase of the bounty, comes greater danger. You must be stronger and work harder in the future, otherwise, if you are not careful, will die. I don't want to hear about any of my siblings leaving me. Yang Qing paused and said in a serious voice, that will drive me crazy. Then, he turned his attention to Anilu. Anilu, teach each of us the method of awakening the domineering and domineering. This is the fastest way to improve the combat effectiveness of all members. As for the armed domineering. Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and then she said condensedly, when I arrive at the Chambord archipelago, I will find a way to strive for a leap in the strength of all our members before entering the New World. Everyone listened carefully to Yang Qing's words, nodded, and Anilu swept towards everyone, the corners of his mouth crooked, but he didn't resist teaching them the ability of Xinhuang. In the original book, he taught this ability to his subordinates, which proved that Enel was actually not a stingy person. Later, after seeing the shipyard, Yang Qing chose a large ship that could accommodate a full 5,000 people, and identified it as the new Reaper, while the original Reaper was placed in the center of the Reaper. As an exhibit, it can also be used in an emergency. The new Reaper, using the most advanced shipbuilding technology at present, has 1,500 light cannons. Among them, it has a variety of other special functions. As for the selection of materials, Yang Qing also spent a lot of money and used solid materials 30,000 meters below the seabed. What do you have to do with me? Espagu's face changed drastically. Anyone who saw such a big pirate would be under great pressure. The reward of 550 million would be heavy for anyone. I want to make a deal with you, Yang Qing said with a smile. What deal? Espagu was very calm, and the bearing of a city official was unmistakable. In a few years, there will be a group of people from the World Court lurking around you. Yang Qing smiled and said the words that changed Espagu's face, as for their purpose. What's the purpose? Espagu asked. Don't you know? Yang Qing had a playful look on his face, and then he didn't turn around. Of course it's the blueprint of Hades in your hand. Could it be? Your target is Hades too. Espagu said in shock. How could such news be known to the people in front of him? He has been very careful to hide it. No, I'm not interested in Hades. All I need is that you use your own ideas to design a new ship for me. I need your skills. Yang Qing shook her head and said, as for Hades, that kind of thing. Quote. A trace of disdain appeared on Yang Qing's face. It's just a tool, the real powerhouse won't care. The difference between the strong and the weak lies in the fact that the strong only believe in their own efforts and strength, while the weak attribute strength to various excuses, means or tools. And I am a strong man. Isn't it? Espagu didn't answer, staring at Yang Qing in front of him. If such a person is not a strong person, how many strong people can there be in the world? From Yang Qing's eyes, he saw the terrible self-confidence and... This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Enraging ambition seems to be able to swallow everything in the world. Such people are terrible. I don't care about Pluto. I believe more in the new ships designed by Mr. Espagu's own ideas and technologies. Just like me, when it comes to ships, Mr. Espagu is also a no compromise. The strong buckler, Yang Qing praised with a smile. That's why I will sincerely exchange this top secret news with you. I don't know, Mr. Espagu, what do you think? Chapter 112 Espagu's face became much more comfortable, and being trusted and praised by people like Yang Qing really made his vanity greatly satisfied. After thinking for a while, the city official found himself helpless and didn't seem to have a choice. Such a character personally leads him here, finds him, and is so sincere. If he refuses, he doesn't need to think too much about his fate. I promise, Espagu sighed. A smile appeared on Yang Qing's face. In this way, the problem of the new type of ship was easily solved. Because of the size of the ships, the speed at which they were built must also be flawed. In just half a day, Yang Qing and others got the news that the shortest time to build a new ship is 1.5 months. This is still the fastest speed after Espagu increased his manpower and reduced many means. In other words, are we going to stay on this island for a month and a half? Yang Qing asked with a frown. In a month and a half, if the Marines wanted to target themselves, they would definitely be able to organize a big attack. For them, this wave of shock is absolutely difficult to defend against. After all, there are only 9 members of the Death God Pirates at this moment, and the number is too small. Even if their individual combat capabilities are excellent, large-scale wars are still somewhat dangerous. The right index finger tapped on the chair lightly, making a slight noise. Yang Qing felt a little troubled, and finally, he sighed, and then said, I understand, then please Mr. Espagu, please take care of our ship first. Huh? Espagu was taken aback for a moment, and asked suspiciously, Your Excellency Lucifer, what is the plan? We will leave the 7 waters for a while, and when Mr. Espagu has finished the boat, we will come back to fetch it. Yang Qing said directly, causing Espagu's eyes to flash, and nodded. He understood what Yang Qing meant. If the Death God Pirates stayed in the capital of the 7 waters, it would be unrealistic given their current reputation. The countless bounty hunters, as well as the high-spirited sailors, were all huge threats. It's really dangerous here. As for Yang Qing, he is a smart person and a heroic character. Just from the fact that he has endured for so long, chose to explode in one fell swoop, and is completely famous in the world, such a character will never choose to be hot-headed. And to rush, he made a plan and then moved. Therefore, at this moment, leaving the 7 waters is the best choice. 3 days later, the Reaper carried the Reaper pirates and drove towards the Chambord Islands. As the last stop of the first half of the Great Waterway, it is very lively here. Various forces are mixed, and it is also the island closest to the naval headquarters. The voyage was not peaceful, and the huge and terrifying bounty was not issued. Countless pirate groups and bounty hunters were all thinking about this new pirate group. The emerging pirate group, which was unknown before, was suddenly so valuable that many people did not believe their strength. Almost every 100 miles the Reaper sails, it encounters enemies who do not know whether to live or die. Either weak or strong, all with greed, desire, and Wong launched an attack on the Reaper. These pirates either offered a bounty of tens of millions, or as high as 200 million, emerging one after another, each with hideous faces, with cruelty and excitement in their eyes. Yang Qing sat cross-legged on the bow with his eyes tightly closed, but he didn't care about everything around him. Dillons and Inalu also looked casual. These people will naturally have other people to deal with. Room. Come and choose cards. Let fate decide your life and my life. Air cannon. Fractured. Luo, Drizzt, Gleister, and Bucky became the main battlers. The 4 of them sailed all the way, and their combat effectiveness increased greatly. Glades, air cannon is stronger than ordinary cannonballs with just 1 shot, and it is invisible and intangible, and its speed is incredible, and almost no one can defend it. Ah! A series of screams came from around the Shinigami, and the 5 or 6 pirate ships that surrounded them were destroyed almost instantly, and then sank. The Reaper sailed peacefully out of the siege, almost unscathed. Just advancing thousands of miles away, it formed a terrifying deterrent. The 4 of Luo stood firmly around the Reaper, their eyes cold, and the powerful strength on their bodies shocked everyone. The strength of these 4 people is almost more powerful than the supernova of this rank. They are all terrifying guys who block a pirate group by one person. No one noticed when he was low-key before, but when his true colors were revealed at this moment, countless people were stunned and trembling all over. This is the strength of the Death God pirates. Tron and Sue pirates, who offered a bounty of 200 million Bailey, were turned into dust in an instant by that red-nosed guy. What ability does he have? It's terrible. And that cowboy, the Blue Rose pirates that guy faced, unexpectedly sank, without even a trace of movement. That kid, corpses the Saipan pirates. Look at that guy, the guy just stretched out a hand, and then the air twisted, and the ship rushed out of the sky. These 4 people are terrible. Countless people watched the battle in shock. At the same time, the pirates or bounty hunters who approached here and wanted to get a piece of the pie turned their bows in fear and left here. However, before their boat had sailed 3 miles, a huge thunderstorm suddenly fell from the sky. All the fleeing ships were shrouded in it. It's Thor, Anilu. Someone screamed. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. With fearful sweat on his forehead. There are also people who have the light of worship in their eyes, which comes from the admiration and pursuit of the strong. If it is said that the Death God pirates is the most prominent this time, it is undoubtedly Enilu, who has a bounty of more than 400 million, which has pushed him to the top. This group of miscellaneous insects has been eliminated. Withdrawing his right hand, Anilu showed a cold smile on his face. Then he walked to Yang Qing's side and sat down. How is your understanding? Anilu asked with a strange smile on the corner of his mouth. Yang Qing didn't open his eyes, just nodded, almost grasped it, seeing the domineering look. It's really amazing. With the experience of controlling himself, Yang Qing's comprehension of seeing and hearing is quite fast. When he has mastered seeing and hearing, he also realizes the difference between the two. At a close distance, the effect of seeing and hearing is worse than controlling oneself. After all, controlling oneself can control the cells of the whole body, and seeing and hearing is only a high degree of recognition of the external airflow, sound, smell, and everything. Chapter 113 Corazon joins. In a wide range, seeing and hearing domineering has a very good effect. If you are close to it, you can control yourself better. However, Yang Qing smiled. The two can be superimposed. The combination of seeing, hearing, and controlling oneself, the handling of details, and the speed of reaction will be 10 times faster than before. In general, the improvement of Yang Qing's control of seeing and hearing is obvious. His reaction is faster, and he will have a hunch about attacks. This is an instinct, different from the deliberate ability of the devil fruit. Next, it is the domineering of the armed color. If you can control the armed color and cultivate it, even if you are a general in the natural system, there are some chances that you will be able to win at that time. After the Reaper crossed a wave of chaotic seas, it continued to drive smoothly. Next, their voyage became peaceful. The strength was displayed, and the desire and hope who were dazzled by the fantasy finally calmed down. 2 days later, on the Reaper, Luo screamed out, showing extremely unstable psychological fluctuations. Corazon. The expressions of the people on the boat changed, and they ran towards the bedroom. After entering the bedroom, they saw the man who had been lying on the boat, touched his head, and sat up slowly. And Luo, who was beside him with a look of excitement, tears came out, and it could be seen that the child's mood was very unstable at the moment. Luo. Corazon held his head, his dizzy vision finally became clear, which surprised him at first glance. Luo, didn't you escape? He followed and glanced at the people in the room, and couldn't help but be stunned again. Here, who are you? Drizzt saw that Luo's good friend finally woke up, and immediately shouted happily, ha 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 ha, if you see it, I will say that he will wake up today. My card is not wrong, ha ha. He had a smug look on his face, especially glanced at Luo, demonstrating. He did a calculation for the latter this morning and figured out that Corazon would wake up today, but he was laughed at by Luo. Luo can finally rest assured, it's great. Dylan said with a twinkle in his eyes. With a smile on his face, he could understand Luo's mood and the latter's excitement at this time. Everyone else was happy for Corazone's sobriety. Bucky, the most active, took out a horn from nowhere, and blew it hard, making a beep beep sound, which annoyed a group of people. Laugh out loud. Thank you, thank you, thank you all. Suddenly, Luo turned around suddenly, with tears in his eyes, and bowed deeply to Yangqing and the others. His whole body was shaking slightly, and he was very excited. The relationship with Corazon was what Luo remembered the most in his life, and it was something he would never forget. Therefore, a scorching temperature surged in his heart at this moment. Luo, who are they? Corazon, still confused at the moment, asked Luo. They are all my brothers and sisters. Luo's eyes were full of tears, but his face was smiling. It is also the one who saved you, Corazon. Corazon was stunned for a moment, then turned his head to look at the 8 people at the door. What he saw were faces full of smiles, completely opposite to Doflamingo's group. Then his brows gradually loosened, and a smile appeared on his face. That's right, Luo, you've found your own home too. Kailasong said softly, stretched out his hand to Luo. Luo took the initiative to walk over, and the latter slapped his hand heavily on Luo's head. Very good, Luo. There is no doubt that Corazon's awakening needs to be celebrated with a banquet. Glades went to prepare meals early. When Corazon was carried out of bed by Luo, the fragrant meals, rum, wine, all kinds of wine were brought to the table, and everyone laughed, sang songs, and started to celebrate. Corazon looked at these unfamiliar faces in front of him, but felt familiar in his heart, and he also understood why Luo liked these people. There was an air of intimacy between these people, a relationship that was special and attractive, and made Corazon feel wholeheartedly happy. Corazon, don't leave, just stay here. Luo was very happy today. He said a lot more, and after drinking a few glasses of wine, he shouted loudly at Corazon with a blushing face. Corazon was stunned for a moment, then looked at the group of smiling people in front of him, and laughed loudly, ha ha ha, okay. I'll stay. Captain is all right. Drizzt asked Luo next to him. Yangqing drank a glass of wine, wiped the wine drop from the corner of his mouth, and then gave a thumbs up with a big laugh. Luo, well done. Ha 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 ha. A series of laughter spread out on the Reaper, and a warm atmosphere permeated it. Corazon was completely infected by wearing this atmosphere, and even started to sing. Luo was also drunk and started talking nonsense. Dylan's looked at Luo's silly appearance and laughed loudly. Enel's eyes were blurred, and he fell on the table. Cheers to Corazon's edition. Finally, everyone toasted, Bucky's horn blared, and Corazon laughed out loud. After the banquet, everyone fell asleep, and the sky gradually fell into darkness. The sound of snoring on the deck was heard in the sky. The next day, the Reaper set off again towards the Chambord Islands. For about a week, the Reaper approached the coast of the Chambord Islands. When the sickle and skull flag fluttered in the wind and was seen by the pirates on the coast, a large number of screams came out. Dead, die, death pirates. Countless pirates sat on the ground in horror, watching the pirates fluttering in the wind in the distance. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Flag, and a huge fear rose in my heart. The reputation of the death god pirates has already spread all over the world. Ordinary pirates don't even dare to face such a pirate group, and they will be shocked by it when they see it. They even came here. Today, it really is a gathering of heroes. All the supernovas are here. Sand crocodile, flamingo, Doflamingo, Seaman Jinping, Tyrant, Bartholomew Bear. These big pirates are all on the Chambord Islands now. The strength of these people is already considered to be the best in the first half of the Great Channel, but they are still no match for the Death God pirates. Everyone watched from a distance, and whispered to each other. Their eyes were full of fear and reverence. In the distance, they saw a figure at the bow of the Death God pirates. Their pupils shrank suddenly, and they stared at it tightly, not letting go for a second. Come out, they are going to disembark, the legendary gang of death. Chapter 114 Gunshots. On the Reaper, the first figure on the bow jumped down sharply, and when he was in the air, the golden long stick in his hand turned sharply, and then stabbed towards the ground. Poof! After a slight sound, the man held a long stick in one hand and stopped directly in the air. His indifferent face looked around like a god, and his icy eyes made countless people feel chills at this moment. And when people in the distance saw what this person looked like, some people stepped back in horror and sat on the ground. Ray, Thor Enelu. Crackling. Enilu's body flashed a blue electric light, and then there was a grin on his face, and he disappeared in place. The next moment, when he appeared again, he had already appeared in front of the man with his butt on the ground. With a body as high as 2 meters, Enelu looks very stalwart, and he can look down on him almost in the face of ordinary people. At this moment, Enelu has some playfulness in his eyes, looking at the terrified eyes of the people around him, and the trembling appearance of the person on the ground, he said contemptuously, "Mortal, are you afraid of me?" Afraid, the man said in horror. Ha ha! Lightning flashed on Enelu's body, and disappeared again. When it appeared, it had already reached another place. After another flash, it disappeared. Seeing Enelu disappear, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The name of the person, the shadow of the tree, facing such a terrifying person head-on, the terrifying pressure is what everyone fears. There is a black sickle and skull flag engraved on the mouth of Shang. It's Enelu, that's right, they are indeed a gang of the death god pirates. In the distance, someone's pupils shrank, then turned around abruptly, and stepped away. Not long after, another figure appeared at the bow of the boat. His back was wrapped in a thick cloth, with a smile on his face. He didn't exude a trace of imposing manner, but he had an amazing charm. He gently jumped off the boat. Then stand firm. Seeing that there was no sign of Enelu under the boat, he gently shook his head, his face a little helpless. This kid Enelu actually ran away by himself. Then the space behind him distorted, and Dylan stepped out with a smile on his face. This newcomer is really maverick. His strength is very attractive to targets. Forget it, it doesn't matter, the average person can handle it as well. Yang Qing waved his hand and walked away from here. Dylan's quickly followed, and the figures of the two quickly disappeared here, and they had other things to do. Immediately following, the people from the Reaper appeared much more normally. They put down the pedal, and then left here talking and laughing all the way. There were 9 people in total, but all of them left this time. All of them wear black sickle and skull flags, and their appearances are indeed the faces on the bounty. They can't be wrong, the death god pirates. 3 kilometers away, someone looked at this place with a telescope from a distance, and said in a dignified low voice. Notify the partners, the target is here, and we are ready to act. One person next to the other immediately said, in addition, try to find opportunities for them to be alone. This group of people is too dangerous, especially when we are in a group, it's hard to take them down. Yes, the last person nodded and left here quickly. Then, the previous person said to the man with the binoculars, how is it, are they separated? Yes, they are divided into groups of 2 or 3, and they have already acted separately. The telescope man nodded with a smile on his face. Then our chances of success can be greatly improved. Another person laughed. Yes, as long as we succeed once, we will be worth it. This group of people is very valuable. The man with the binoculars smiled and nodded, some kind of flashing desire. In their eyes, the Death God Pirates group is bay profit as wealth. The Death God Pirates quickly divided into several waves to walk together. Among them, Enelu was in a group, Yangqing Dillons was in a group of 2, Luo and Corazon were in a group, Glaives and Bucky were in a group, and Tracy was in a group. Special, Robin and Mariah. The 10 people were divided into 5 groups and scattered in the Chambord Islands and began to act. So, where are we going? Dillons asked in a low voice on the way. Let's find a place first, as for our plan. Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and there was a coldness in his eyes. They will act slowly, not in a hurry. Okay, this time, we are finally no longer powerless. Dylan said coldly. Yang Qing smiled and looked at Dylan seriously. Yes, this time, let's make a mess. Where to go first? The two continued to walk. Dylan's still curious. Go to Rayleigh, Hades Rayleigh. Yang Qing said. What? Dylan said in shock. That's right, I asked him for the training method of armed arrogance, but I forgot to ask Shanks last time, which is really a mistake. Yang Qing said angrily. Dylan's touched his head, speechless, and silently followed behind Yang Qing. On another street in the Chambord archipelago, Glades and Bucky were taciturn, and the other jumped around excitedly, unable to stop at all. These two people who don't fit in well formed a group, which is really amazing. Surprised. Hey, I said Bucky. We still have a mission, Glades reminded friendly. Mission? It's okay, let's play first, Chef, don't you think this bubble is fun? Haha, you can actually sit in it. Bucky laughed and had a lot of fun. Grid. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Ryder's face was full of black lines, and he was too lazy to speak. On the side of Aney Road, he turned into lightning fast to the limit, and stopped on the street 10 seconds later. Just as soon as he appeared, the people beside him suddenly sat down on the ground in large numbers, shocked by his cold aura. Oh, Apple. Anilu glanced at the streets on both sides, his eyes lit up slightly. It seems that I haven't eaten in a long time. He strode over and walked towards the apple vendor. His terrifying aura made the fruit owner sit on the ground in fright on the spot. Anilu didn't care, just grabbed the apple and put it to his mouth, opening his mouth wide, ready to bite it. At this moment, a click sounded, a figure appeared on his right side, and the muzzle was fixed on Anilu's temple. Don't move, Thor, Anilu, otherwise, I'll crash you right away. Anilu's eyes froze, and there was killing intent on his face, but he didn't care at all, and slammed down the apple. The figure's face turned cold, and then he pulled the trigger unceremoniously. The bullet rubbed against the gun bore, and the strong smell of gunpowder caused by the high temperature spread into Anilu's nostrils. Bang! The loud gunshots spread all over the street, and everyone stopped. Chapter 115 Hawkeye. On the other side, Luo and Corazon were walking together, and the two talked while walking, but the strange thing was that people on the surrounding streets could not hear their voices. I see. After you escaped, you were caught again, and then you were taken to the ship of the Death God pirates. Corazon said thoughtfully. Well, yes. Luo nodded. Then when we were on Gaia Island, and saw you in Dover's hands, Dylan's got you out. It's really thanks to them that I can survive. Corazon sighed, feeling that he had a great fate. Yes, everyone is a very good person. Luo said with a smile. Corazon also smiled. He stayed here for a short time, but he deeply felt the intimate brotherhood and partnership between the people of the Death God. You've grown a lot too. Corazon touched Luo's head, who smiled happily. Of course, I am now a big pirate with a bounty of 100 million Bailey. Luo said proudly. There was a flash of shock on Kayla Song's face. He knew that Luo would not lie, but Luo was still so young, really. You are already a 100 million pirate. Hey, Corazon, it's time for us to deal with the captain's task. Luo said with a frown. I didn't hear what mission the captain gave you. Corazon asked suspiciously. What mission? Luo haha laughed and said with a hilarious smile, it's a very interesting mission, let's go. What kind of mission is it? Corazon was very curious. Kid and the Tianlong people, Luo he said with a smile. What? As for Drizzt, the three of them chatted and laughed casually. If you carefully observe the traces of the three of them walking, you will find that they are slowly approaching the place near the Marine Division. The cards in Drizzy's hand kept switching. He was smiling, but his eyes were full of solemnity. It seems that my task is an indispensable part of it. The pressure is very high. Following Robin and Mariah, Drizzy's words echoed in Yang Qing's mind. It sounds simple, but Drizzt clearly knows how big the cost is. Fortunately, I have mastered the arrogance of seeing and hearing, otherwise this task is really difficult to complete. Shaking his head and sighing, Drizzt moved on. The first stage of the task has not yet started, and he was quite idle for a while, so he just took advantage of this time to be lazy. At this time, Yang Qing and Dylan's also came to the door of a bar. It's here. Yang Qing smiled, looking at the bar's plaque. Aunt Xiao's ripping off bar. Dylan's read out his name in a stunned manner. This bar is so blatant, it tricks its guests. It must be expensive. Yang Qing shrugged. I didn't bring any money. Dylan said quickly. Yang Qing waved his hand, walked in first, and his voice came out, making Dylan's face dark. I don't have the habit of carrying money either. The two walked into the bar one after the other. When they saw the empty space inside, they couldn't help but be taken aback. Yang Qing showed a hint of understanding, and then said softly. As expected, the business is bad. At the bar, a woman with a cigarette raised her eyebrows, and then said a little rudely, It's rude to say this about the host's bar. Yang Qing shook his head, then sat down and said lightly, I'm here to ask for some information. Intelligence. Aunt Xiao's eyes flashed, playing with her taste. I think you have found the wrong person. I'm just a bar here, and I'm not responsible for any intelligence. Dylan smiled and looked at Yang Qing's face. I need to know the location of the naval generals, and... Yang Qing's face became serious and his voice became low, and the defensive map inside the Tianlongren Palace. Aunt Xiao's eyes flashed with shock, and she looked at the two people on the table. One was serious, the other had a smile on her face. She blinked, then took a breath. Her tone was also serious. This information is not simple. Of course it won't be easy. Yang Qing shook his head and smiled. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to you. I need a little time, and the price is very expensive. Aunt Xiao said with a smile. No problem. Yang Qing nodded and agreed very simply. There was a hint of surprise in Aunt Xiao's eyes, and then she smiled. He personally poured a glass of dark beer for Yang Qing and Dylan's, and then returned to the bar with a smile. Also, what about Rayleigh? Yang Qing asked casually after taking a sip of beer. After saying a word, Aunt Xiao turned cold and looked at the two people in front of her. The bar was empty with only 3 people. At this moment, it seems that the bar is isolated from the outside world. Yang Qing and Dylan's were drinking beer with their heads down, while Aunt Xiao was staring at the two of them. Time began to freeze, and the moment when Rayleigh was mentioned, it seemed like turning off the lights, and the atmosphere was a little stiff. At this moment, the door of the bar creaked open, and a figure walked in. This man was dressed in a black suit, with a huge knife on his back, and his face was cold. The 3 people in the bar couldn't help but look over, and when they saw who was coming, their eyes flashed with surprise. It turned out to be him. Hawkeye Mahawk. Yang Qing and Dylan's looked at each other, a little surprised that this person would come here. They are coming to the Chambord Islands. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. When I was there, I heard the traces of other supernovas, such as the group of people who had become Chihuahai in the original book, and those who didn't. But the only thing I didn't hear was the news of this person. He has a bounty of 550 million, and the bounty is the same as you, boss. Dylan's touched Yang Qing with a smile in his eyes. These 2 people have the same bounty, so who will be stronger? Hawkeye, what are you doing here? How could someone like you appear here with me? Aunt Xiao asked coldly at the bar. I just got news from one person, so I came to see. Hawkeye's voice was very magnetic, and he turned his head to look at Yang Qing and Dylan's who were sitting beside him. Ghost, Dylan's. Death, Lucifer. Hawkeye read out 2 names, and Aunt Xiao narrowed her eyes, as if she understood the meaning of the man in the black suit in front of her. Is this guy here to fight? They are all famous people in the world. How about Lucifer, with a sword on his back? He is a swordsman, don't you come and try. Mahawk's tone was very flat, without a hint of provocation. It seemed to be just ordinary, just a friendly discussion. Chapter 116 Contest. Dylan's eyes lit up and bumped into Yang Qing. Hey, boss, I'm a little excited that he wants to fight with you. Who is stronger between the two of you? Aunt Xiao's expression changed greatly, and she said loudly, Hey, don't mess around, this place will be demolished. Don't worry, we will try it in a place where no one is around. Hawkeye said calmly, making Aunt Xiao quiet, mumbling incessantly. Yang Qing rolled his eyes, then said, I'm sorry, I've been a little busy recently. Dylan's looked disappointed and refused. He thought that the boss agreed unceremoniously, but he would refuse, which was beyond his expectations. That's really disappointing. Hawkeye raised his eyebrows and sat on the table beside Yang Qing. Aunt Xiao poured a beer for the latter. Mahawk slowly drank it in one breath, and then heaved a long sigh of relief. It's not easy to see a character like you. Are you really not going to have a fight? Mahawk warmly invited. At this time, Mahawk had a perverted desire to fight, which made Yang Qing his face turned black. Hearing these ordinary words in Yang Qing's eyes, it was like a man with a serious face, standing in front of him solemnly, and then sending out a love invitation to him. Aren't you going to have a haircut? Friend. You can play by yourself. Yang Qing said with a stinky face, drinking the beer in one breath. Dylan's was stunned, and Hawkeye was completely stunned. He didn't understand why the latter had such a big reaction. Where is Rayleigh? Yang Qing asked again. Who is Rayleigh? I don't know him. Aunt Xiao rolled her eyes and said impolitely. Yang Qing's eyes flashed, and then he said seriously, I have something to ask him, and please tell me if I wanted to find Shanks, he is probably in the New World. Shanks? Do you know Shanks? Before Aunt Xiao could answer, Hawkeye interjected, making Yang Qing's face dark again. He is now annoyed when he sees Hawkeye for some reason. Those weird words made him completely take the former as a jerk. This first impression is difficult to change. Evening. Aunt Xiao's eyes flickered and she said, I'm going out now, maybe I'll give someone a coating, maybe I'll be drinking. I didn't expect you to know Shanks. Well, yes, we are good friends. Yang Qing said with a smile. Shanks and I also hit it off right away, very good friends. Hawkeye next to him said, causing Yang Qing to clench his fists, and the veins on his forehead burst. Are you doing this on purpose? Definitely intentional, definitely intentional. You are hooking me up, definitely hooking up. In the original book, you clearly speak very little, okay. How is it like a snake sperm disease now? I suddenly found that I have some time, let's try it out. Yang Qing stood up abruptly and sneered at Hawkeye. He couldn't help it anymore, he wanted to beat this bastard. Really? Hawkeye also stood up abruptly, and a brilliant light flashed in his pupils, the kind of excitement that Yang Qing opposite him could clearly feel. This guy is very happy. Yang Qing's mouth twitched, and he suddenly felt that he was wrong. Half an hour later, in an uninhabited forest in the Chambord archipelago. Tilde point, control the strength, don't destroy the island. Dylan's shouted loudly from the side. The two were facing each other in the field, standing 20 meters apart. The atmosphere was very gloomy. Hack you little bitch. Yang Qing roared inwardly, he hated gaze. Call. The wind blew, and the eagle's eyes released a fierce momentum, and the eyes were sharp, like a real eagle, which made people daunting. Just bent his knees. The next moment, the dust on the ground suddenly rose, and his whole person had disappeared. Left. Yang Qing's eyes shrank, his right hand suddenly pulled out towards the back, and the blue light flashed violently, drawing a graceful arc, like a long. Bang! Huge wind pressure came from the center where the two were fighting and spread to all around. The trees among the trees were blown to and fro, and dust was everywhere. Dylan's closed his eyes bright. The battle between these two was just a test, and it was already so terrifying, it was too strong. Whoosh! The two disappeared almost at the same time. The next moment, they appeared 10 meters away. The long swords swept across. The speed of the two was incredible, and they began to collide violently in the air, wiping out golden electric flowers. Yongqing studied the Dugu Nine Swords and integrated it into his own bones. When he reached the realm of no sword moves, he integrated the broken characters of the Dugu Nine Swords into his own instinct. Every attack is a direct attack on the enemy's flaws, the key points, and there is no disadvantage. But at this moment, facing Hawkeye, this swordsman with superb skills is a match for his opponent, and it is difficult to tell the difference. On the surface, the two of them seem to have flaws in their bodies, but once they fight, they have no flaws. This is a super high state. If you don't move it, it will become a 10,000 situation. After slashing against each other thousands of times, the expressions of both of them changed, and they suddenly increased their strength, and then fiercely swung the long swords in their hands and slashed towards the opposite side. Buzz! This time, the huge impact went from the middle of the two towards the sky and the ground, not in all directions. This was formed under the deliberate control of the two to prevent their powerful sword pressure and sword chi from being discovered by the people on the island. Scoff! A bottomless crack appeared on the ground, and the two people standing on it, after swinging this sword, the ground trembled for a while, and their feet were deeply immersed in the soil. The huge power was all unloaded into the ground, but a lot of them were still endured by them. Dylan's opens his mouth. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Looking into the sky. There, the dense clouds seemed to have been cut by a sword, but they were actually divided into two halves, with a bottomless ravine in the middle, and it looked like the sky was cut in half. This miraculous scene was caused by the aftermath of the swords cut by the two, which seemed to be able to cut through everything. The swords of these two guys are terrible. Dylan's was sweating profusely. After seeing the sword, the two in the field stared at each other, then slowly withdrew the long sword, and slowly put the long sword into the scabbard behind them, making a choking sound. Stop fighting, Dylan's asked suspiciously. Hawkeye walked over slowly and explained, if we continue to fight, our power will be out of control, and it may destroy the island. However, with such power, we can't tell the difference, so we can only look forward to the next encounter. Yongqing was silent, looking down at the ground, not wanting to take another look at Hawkeye. The latter stared at him with piercing eyes, and was slightly disappointed when he did not receive a response from his eyes after waiting for a while. Then, look forward to the next meeting, the god of death, you are very strong. Hawkeye left after saying the last sentence. Dylan's looked at Yongqing strangely, and then asked, Boss, why don't you speak? Damn it. Staring at Hawkeye's back, Yongqing gritted his teeth and said. What? Dylan's was stunned. Chapter 117 Evaluation. Dylan's couldn't understand the meaning of Yongqing's words at all. After all, he couldn't get into Yongqing's mind, and he couldn't know the eagle eye at the moment. In fact, in Yongqing's eyes, he was already a wretched gay guy. And Yongqing's own brain hole is also wide open, and he even sees Hawkeye as a gay. However, the power of this kid is really strong enough. Yongqing's eyes flashed slightly, and he thought to himself as he looked at Hawkeye. Although the two didn't really start a duel of the strongest power, but the battle so far has almost felt the bottom line of each other's strength. It is indeed very strong, and it is a very terrifying opponent. Just from the level of the sword, Hawkeye has indeed reached the peak of this world. Yongqing also has some admiration for Hawkeye in his heart. Unlike him, Hawkeye's path is mostly his own. And he, with the 9 swords of Dugu, and countless masters in the system fighting against him, almost cheating, can only become so strong and so fast. This is the essential gap. If he was placed in an environment like Hawkeye, the former might not necessarily be stronger. Boss, this guy deserves to be a powerhouse on the same level as you, he is indeed strong. Dylan's exclaimed aside. Yongqing nodded, then took a step and waved his hand. Let's go, Rayleigh should be back, we still have business to do. After that, the two returned to the bar. In the bar, there are 2 people sitting at the moment. At the bar, Aunt Xiao was scrubbing wine glasses and various wines. On the high chair opposite was a white-haired man with glasses, with a faint smile on his face, looking very peaceful. "Rayleigh, they're here." Aunt Xiao saw Yang Qing Dillons and the two of them pushed in the door and said to the person opposite her. Rayleigh nodded, a ray of light flashed under his eyes. He didn't turn around, just slowly picked up the wine glass on the table and took a sip. The right hand of this one piece does not have the slightest strong aura emitting from the whole body, but it has a deterrent that cannot be underestimated. Yang Qing and Dillons looked at each other, then sat next to Rayleigh. "Aunt Xiao, a glass of rum per person, I'll treat you." Yang Qing greeted with a smile. Aunt Xiao looked at him suspiciously, as if wondering if he had the money to pay. But in the end, they still put a wine glass in front of the two of them. "I heard that you made a special trip to find me," Rayleigh said softly. "If it is to coat the ship and go to the New World, I have recently rested, and the time may not be right. If it is something else, I think I'm an old man and probably can't be of much help either." "Hello, Senior Rayleigh, I'm the captain of the Death God Pirates, Lucifer." Yang Qing ignored Rayleigh's words and introduced himself softly. "I came to you for an important matter." "Oh," Rayleigh raised his eyebrows, as if interested, and asked with a smile, "What's the matter?" "I need a way to cultivate arrogance and domineering. I hope you can teach me," Yang Qing said solemnly, while Dillons on the side was slightly nervous. Armed arrogance is different from the foreseeable ability of seeing arrogance, and he is more inclined to take the initiative to attack. Especially important is that it can play a vital role in the face of fruit ability, especially natural fruit ability. It is the only means other than Halu Stone and those who restrain the ability. And such an offensive method is an ability that must be mastered in the New World. Otherwise, in the face of various difficulties and contrarians, it will inevitably be caught off guard, and even difficult to prevent. Armed and domineering, it is able to achieve a qualitative leap in one's own strength. As the armed color domineering, Rayleigh's eyes flashed, and then he said with a smile, "Why did you come to me?" "I forgot to ask for it from Shanks. I just came here today, and we really need such strength, so I can only trouble you, old man," Yang Qing said seriously. "Ha ha." Rayleigh smiled, then raised his glass, gestured towards Yang Qing, and was about to finish his drink. "Shanks mentioned you to me, when he happened to pass by the Chambord Islands some time ago. Once two people were mentioned. One of them was you, Death, Lucifer. At that time, you were still an unknown little pirate, but now, you are already a famous big pirate." Yang Qing smiled. Things change, sometimes so fast. No one can predict the future, and no one can change the past. He also thought that before arriving in the New World, he would go quietly, but sometimes, fate is really indescribable, and it will always force people to that situation. "Want to know what the red-haired boy thinks of you?" Rayleigh suddenly smiled. "Oh, I also hope that the seniors will talk about it. I'm also very curious," Yang Qing said with a smile. He said a word. Rayleigh narrowed his eyes slightly, as if recalling, ambition, kindness, cruelty, cold-blooded, king, all these can be faintly seen in that guy. He is a very dangerous guy, but the people around him feel inexplicably at ease and trust him. Maybe he has the power to change the world. Quote. "He spoke highly of you. The people among the four emperors only have the power to change the era or a part of the region. Even Roger only has the ability to open the era. But for you, he actually said you have the power to change the world." Quote. "The world is so wide, it's easier said than done if you want to change him." Rayleigh sighed and looked at Yang Qing. "Maybe it's because I'm really old. I still haven't seen your special. The only thing I see is the faint tyrannical aura emanating from you. Unfathomable power. But changing the world, I really didn't see it." This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. Maybe I'm being more direct, old man, but that's the truth. In this world, power is never a narrow category, and one's own strength can never measure the concept of power, at least for me now, looking at you now. I don't see any hope that you can change the whole world." Rayleigh shook his head. He only saw the strength of the latter. As for the other, maybe there is, but he has not noticed it yet. There was a hint of surprise in Yang Qing's eyes. He didn't expect Shanks to rate him so highly, and he didn't expect Rayleigh to care about him so much. Yes, this Pirate King's right hand, even if he sees his own strength, still doesn't seem to care very much. In a blink of an eye, he understood that such a person pays more attention to a person's spirit. In this world, strength can be improved, and can quickly reach a certain level, but only the spirit is difficult to improve. This kind of thing is either formed the day after tomorrow, or is born with it. Chapter 118 1-on-5. As for Yang Qing's audacity, Rayleigh did not see it, so he would not understand where Shanks' high evaluation of the latter came from. Looking at people, you will never see their nature, character, and future direction from one or two sides. This is a long process. I understand. Yang Qing nodded. He didn't argue or explain anything. When he understood, he would naturally understand. Standing up, Yang Qing was about to leave. Since there was no result, he naturally wouldn't stay here. After Dylan's was stunned, he also followed. It can be seen that this Rayleigh does not seem to want to teach the two to be domineering. Where are you going? Rayleigh asked suddenly after the two got up. Yang Qing paused, then smiled and said, since Senior Rayleigh doesn't want to teach us, I can only say, I'm bothering you. A ray of light flashed under Riley's glasses, and a smile appeared on his face. When did I say I wouldn't teach you? If I remember correctly, old man, I just said, I can't see your power to change the world from where did you come from. But I still admire you very much. You are not arrogant or impetuous, and you know how to advance and retreat. Besides, I have to give Shanks face. There was a hint of stunned expression on Yang Qing's face, and then he understood and said with a smile, thank you so much, Senior. Then come here. Riley turned around and walked outside the bar. I won't have much time to teach you. I can only lead you in the door, and the rest of the cultivation still depends on you. Yang Qing and Dylan's followed closely. For them, being aggressive is indeed very important. The screen shifts to Ani Road. Bang! Huge gunshots resounded throughout the street, and all the pedestrians stopped and looked nervously at the place where the sound came from. Seeing this, they immediately showed panic on their faces. They saw 5 men in denim jackets in front of the fruit stand, holding pistols in their right hands, aiming at a man who was 2 meters tall, and the man's right, a pistol is smoking gunpowder. Kill, kill, kill. For a moment up and down the street, terrified screams continued to come out. Pedestrians were chaotic and fled in all directions. The apple in Annaloo's hand fell to the ground, rolled a meter below the fruit stand, and then held it up, with the clear bite facing up. A drop of blood quietly fell to the ground, and then fell into bright red petals that were split in 4 or 5. A cold killing intent appeared on Annaloo's face. On his forehead, short bloodstains appeared, and white smoke appeared, as if burned out by the high heat. Don't move. Next time it will really crash you. An indifferent voice came from his right side. The muzzle of the gun was still pointed at him. Our bullets are armed with domineering and domineering, enough for one shot. Blast you into the sky. Better, be careful. Annaloo's face became even colder, but a cruel smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. The next moment, he turned around sharply, facing the cold muzzle, and said coldly, who do you think I am? I'm the god of thunder, Annaloo. Zzzz. The dazzling lightning flashed up, and the cowboy man opposite immediately changed his face, suddenly pulled the trigger with his right hand, and shouted, shoot. Bang 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 bang. 5 huge gunshots in a row filled the street, but after the 5 gunshots, a man was provoked on the long stick of Annaloo. It was the man who shot him first. This shot directly pierced through the opponent's belly, and the high-heat lightning flashed continuously, burning the latter's skin to pitch black, and screams kept coming from the cowboy man's mouth. Who do you think I am? With a flick of Annaloo's long stick, the man was thrown 50 meters away, and slammed into the room in the distance, causing the room to collapse immediately, and the dust drowned the latter. At the moment when the shot was fired, Annaloo completed an almost unbelievable Jedi counterattack. With one stick, the latter will be killed in seconds. Of course, he was not without injuries. Step by step towards the front, Anilu looked cold and looked at the 4 people in front of him. In his cruel eyes, the panic of these 4 people was clearly reflected. Bean-sized sweat beads continued to seep from their foreheads. They were so afraid of themselves that even the right hand holding the gun was trembling. This guy, is too fast. He dodged our bullets and couldn't hit him at all. Lunt Man, who once captured a bounty of 250 million Bailey, was killed in one blow by him. It's terrible, how do we beat him? Through the heart network, Anilu could clearly hear the thoughts in the hearts of these people, and a disdainful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. The armed arrogance of these 5 people is indeed very difficult to deal with. Once they hit him, they will inevitably be injured. If other parts are fine, if it is the heart or head, they will definitely die. But they forgot that what they have is not just the elemental body of the natural system, and the heart network, and the speed of lightning. Anilu continued to walk, and every time he took a step, blood dripped from his body. These are the injuries caused to him by 5 people, all of which are just scratches, not serious. His speed was fast, but the bullets still grazed him. There were 5 wounds in total, 1 on the forehead, 2 on the shoulder, and 2 on the belly. Crackling. 3 steps later, Anilu looked at the terrified 4, and their figures disappeared instantly. The next moment, when he appeared, he was already behind one of them. Bang bang bang. 3 consecutive gunshots rang out in an instant. The other 3 were not easy people, and they found him immediately and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Anilu stood on the spot, his footsteps became a little illusory, turning into thunder and lightning. This chapter is not over, click on the next page to continue reading. Easily dodged 3 bullets. Then, his indifferent eyes looked at the man who slowly turned around and stretched out his right hand. Bang! Suddenly, Anilu grabbed each other's head. He has an advantage in height, is condescending, and looks extremely oppressive. It's over. The pupil of the man caught by Anilu suddenly shrank. The next moment, a terrifying arc flashed between Anilu's palms. 50 million volts, discharge. Crackling. The terrifying voltage turned the other party into a scorched black in just an instant. Then, Anilu threw his right hand, and the latter fell softly to the ground, losing consciousness. Click. The sound of 3 gun bolts rang out, and Anilu felt a chill in the surroundings. He sneered and swept the long stick. The 3 people in front of them were immediately forced to jump 10 meters to the rear, looking nervously at the tall man in front of them. The pressure is too much. Facing Anilu, the pressure in the hearts of the 3 of them was so great that they could not relax for a moment. Chapter 119 Quietly. Speaking of which, these 3 are also very powerful bounty hunters. They have also hunted pirates with a maximum value of 300 million, which can be regarded as an upstream existence among bounty hunters. This time, they set their sights on Anilu, but the result shocked them. The guy with a bounty of 400 million, the gap with the 300 million is actually so big. Every step of their movement was seen through, and the speed of the other party was as fast as lightning, and it came to them in an instant. This is the power of the natural system, and this is the power of Thor Anilu. A stick swept, and the 3 retreated in horror. There is a terrifying lightning force on the long stick. If you touch it a little, you are afraid that you will be seriously injured, which is frightening. Mortals! Anilu sneered, and a blue electric light suddenly flashed on the long stick. The next moment, it attacked the terrified 3 people at a terrifying speed. The 3 of them kept jumping and dodging. Under the power of thunder and lightning, they only have room to dodge. Anilu was almost playing, there was no seriousness in his icy eyes, and his expression was very playful. The thunder and lightning on the long stick, like a steady stream, went towards the 3 of them. It lasted for a full 30 seconds before it stopped. After looking at the surrounding scene again, countless people were horrified. Within a radius of 100 meters, there are scorch marks everywhere. The 3 of them were also panting, looking at Anilu in horror. It's boring. Anilu seemed to have had enough, taking a step forward and disappearing into lightning. When he reappeared, he came to one of the three people who were horrified. With a swipe of the long stick, the man was directly hit, and the thunder and lightning made him tremble in an instant. In less than 2 seconds, the man's eyes appeared. Turning it over, he passed out, with white smoke all over his body. Seeing this scene, the other two became even more discolored and ran away. But after eating, Anilu blocked one of them with just a flash, and the blue electric light on his right hand flickered, aiming at the latter. With the sound of crackling, the latter screamed and fell to the ground. Immediately afterwards, with only the last day left, Anilu swung his long stick and turned into a light of lightning, which went straight through the man's back, pierced his heart, and caused the latter to die directly. He easily defeated the three enemies. In the eyes of everyone who was avoiding, Anilu walked a few steps to the fruit stand before, and then picked up a whole apple and bit it fiercely. When he chewed a few times and swallowed it, a satisfied smile appeared on his face. "The taste, it's not bad," Anilu exclaimed, took one step and disappeared here. "That's Thor Anilu, the Death God Pirates, the captain of the 2nd Division. How scary. Anilu is here, what about the others? Are they all in the Chambord Islands? This group of people is terrible. There are a large number of pirates gathered on this island at the moment. It is hard to imagine what kind of sensation it will cause once it breaks out." When everyone saw Anilu leaving, they started talking quietly just now, and the bursting power of the stalwart figure just now sounded, and they were still full of fear in their hearts. The power of lightning is almost invincible. Terrible aggression, unparalleled speed, especially that man, seems to have a godlike insight. Drizzt, who accompanied Robin and Mariah, entered an amusement park. "It's a bit bad luck, it seems that I've entered the wolf's den." Drizzt looked at the cards in his hand with a frown, a little helpless. "It seems that trouble will come to you." His eyes swept around, and in the playground, at least a dozen figures were looking at them strangely. These people, Drizzt can see at a glance, the fiery light in their eyes. They are here for the three of them. "It seems that there is a group of unidentified people who have been staring at us for a long time." Drizzt's eyes flickered, and he judged that, with a trembling between his fingers, 5 cards appeared. "Then there is only fighting." But Drizzt looked at Robin and Mariah who were having a good time in front of him. "You can't spoil their interest, let's solve you all in silence." The red light flickered in Dylan's hand, and the 5 cards were wrapped with magical power. Then Dylan's trembled, and the 5 cards mysteriously disappeared from his fingertips. The next moment, hidden into the 5 people in the dark place inexplicably had 5 more cards in their hands. After they turned the cards over and looked at them, they were stunned. "Poker." A smile appeared in Drizzt's eyes. "Have you checked the cards?" "Then, without a doubt, my cards are the highest, and it seems that I have won." "Putong," sounded 5 times in a row, and the 5 people who were hidden in the dark fell to the ground softly, and their noses had lost their breath. The strange power robbed them of their lives in an instant. Drizzt continued to move forward casually, glanced around, and saw the domineering spread out, and determined the number of enemies. "Are there 12 more? It's easy to solve." During the flashing red light, 5 more cards appeared in his hand, then trembled, the cards in his hand disappeared, and 3 seconds later, 5 people fell again in the amusement park. This time, their companions finally discovered this strange thing. "No, the enemy has made a move. The mysterious power has made them all lose their lives." In the dark, the man said in horror, "Inform the others immediately, we will retreat. It's too weird. It's Drizzt, that card master Drizzt." Someone found the cards in Drizzt's hand, and at this moment, 5 cards appeared again, and 5 figures fell again. By this time, 15 of the 17 people who were in charge of chasing down Drizzt's 3 had fallen, leaving only 2 of them. Drizzt's bizarre abilities terrified these people. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The last 2. Drizzt's eyes showed a smile, and he sensed the horror in the eyes of the 2 men. The 2 cards were taken out of his hand and threw lightly. As soon as these 2 cards appeared, they seemed to pass through space, and the resistance of the air to it completely disappeared. In just an instant, the two cards turned into a streamer and appeared in front of the necks of the two. With two soft sounds of poof, a thin red line appeared on the necks of the two of them, and then they covered their necks and fell softly to the ground. Different from the earth-shattering when Anilu activates his ability, Drizzy's ability is simply bizarre, silently killing people. Even people who are slow to respond will not even be able to detect the cause after their death. Chapter 120 The Cage. In silence, Drizzt killed all 17. At this time, Robin and Moria were still playing happily. Drizzt looked at the two smiling faces, and a smile appeared in his eyes. Then, he quickened his pace and came behind the two of them. Drizzt, why so slow? Robin asked with a smile. Oh, the scenery at the back is very beautiful. Drizzt smiled and concealed what happened just now. On a street near the auction house, Luo and Corazon were walking and talking. So, are you still going to do this in the end? Corazon's eyes were a little dignified, looking at Luo and said slowly. Yes, do it, this is the captain's task. Luo said with a smile. Corazon didn't say a word, took a deep breath of the cigarette in his hand, and then exhaled a faint ring of smoke. His mind was a little heavy. Kidnapping Tianlong people, what a heavy word. Luo's mission turned out to be this. It can be said that the degree of danger of the mission is almost the highest. Don't worry, the captain said that the risk of this mission is the lowest. Luo said with a smile. Corazon's eyes flashed, and he sighed in his heart. Luo, you really believe in your captain? Of course, he didn't say this sentence, and if he thought about it with his head, he would know, how could kidnapping the Tianlong people be the least dangerous? But in the end, he just said one thing. Then do it. Kidnap the dragons. Then let's come together. Yeah, Corazon, don't worry, Luo said with a serious smile. Corazon was taken aback for a moment, then nodded. Trusting this thing is really a very heavy topic. On the streets of Rome, the whole street suddenly became quiet. On the streets on both sides, countless people knelt down on the ground, their bodies trembled, and they didn't even dare to raise their eyes. Facing the Tianlong people, all they had in their hearts was fear. They are cruel, brutal, cold-blooded, and ruthless. They are the most hateful, but most indefensible group of people in this world. On the central street, at the very front is a squat Tianlong man with a bubble on his head. In front of him, a thin woman is slowly crawling forward. The woman has a beautiful face. On the cheeks full of scars, you can see how charming she was in her most beautiful moments. But now, her eyes have no light, and her heart has lost hope for life. The whip hit the woman's face, causing a bloodstain to appear. The woman's eyes flickered slightly, as if she felt pain, but in an instant, it became numb again. What a goddamn slave. It's actually broken. The Tianlong man spit, then pulled out the pistol around his waist, and aimed the muzzle at the woman in front of him. Crack. The sound of hanging the gun bolt was heard by countless people, and the pedestrians on both sides of the street trembled. They felt sadness and sympathy for the woman, silently wept in their hearts, and clenched their fists unconsciously. What would happen when I became that woman in another place? The muzzle of the gun was on the woman's head, and the Tianlongren's right index finger was on the trigger. In the corner, Luo looked angry and was about to rush out. Corazon behind him grabbed him and covered his mouth. Don't be impulsive, Luo, Corazon shouted, and he shrouded the two with silence, so that the sound could not be transmitted. Tianlong people. Luo's face was gloomy, his fists were tightly clenched, and there was no one who was a little kind. Young people with blood will feel nothing in their hearts when they see this scene, they will feel the anger in their hearts burning. The whole body is shaking. Are such brutal and cruel Tianlong people really suitable to rule this world? Corazon, I want to act. That woman. Luo covered his eyes with his right hand, and his voice was crying, did you see her eyes? Corazon was silent, he could see clearly. Her eyes are full of numbness and coldness. Her body is still alive, but she is dead. Death, for her, is liberation. Luo roared loudly, Corazon's face trembled, and his heart was heavy. Anyway, the captain's mission is to kidnap them, whoever is the same. Luo said loudly, his eyes fixed on the Tianlong people in the distance. Corazon clenched his fists and put them down again. Okay, let's do it. A look of joy appeared in Luo's tearful eyes, and then he strode out of the alley, and Corazon followed closely, eliminating all the sounds around him. On both sides of the street, all the pedestrians were kneeling, and no one dared to look up here, creating the best opportunity for their actions. When the Tianlong people felt that something was wrong, Luo and Corazon were already standing in front of him. Who are you? He opened his mouth and asked, but when the words came out, he was horrified to find that he didn't hear his own voice. What's wrong with me? There was still no sound, as if at this moment, the world was silenced. Someone, come quickly. His guard was in the street not far away, and if he shouted, he would definitely come back. However, after shouting, the Tianlong people changed color, but still no sound came out. Luo, hurry up. With a serious and nervous expression, Kelisong walked over and knocked out the chunky Tianlong Ren with a punch, and then carried it up. The Tianlong Ren's weight made him sweat a little. This pig is really heavy. Luo looked at the woman on the ground, he lifted her up, looked at the latter's numb eyes, and said softly, You are free. Freedom. When the woman saw Luo, there seemed to be a little light in her eyes, gradually. This chapter is not over. Click on the next page to continue reading. The ground, a mocking smile appeared on her face. What is freedom? You were born in this world, and you have already entered the cage. 1. In the cage named Tianlongren. Then, tremblingly, she pulled out the gun from the Tianlongren's hand, and quickly turned to her forehead in the shocked eyes of Luo and Corazon. Bang! Only Luo and Corazon could hear the brief gunshots, which shocked their whole bodies. Only by death can you be free. The woman's words slowly echoed in their ears.